While Kraft was soaking in the life-sustaining capsule and dreaming of spring and autumn, Thor, who was exiled to the Earth, also came to the vicinity of the place where Mjolnir fell with the help of the newly acquainted Jane Foster. Because of the noise made by Kraft before, the guard here is much tighter than before. You wait here, I'll get the hammer and your equipment back. Thor finished, and before Jane Foster stopped him, he rushed to the makeshift base of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just that he had just drilled through the barbed wire fence before he was discovered. Intruder found. Intruder found. The previous Kraft's invasion made S.H.I.E.L.D. once again stepped up its guard, the alarm in the base was once again sounded, and S.H.I.E.L.D. agents quickly surrounded Thor. Ha! Come on, then. Thor, who is a reckless man, not only has no fear, but no longer hides his figure, choosing a frontal breakthrough. Although deprived of his divine power, Thor's thousands of years of war experience is not a display. Even a pig can have a skill in 1,000 years, not to mention Thor as a vanguard general. Under the premise of not using firearms, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s agent is not Thor's opponent at all, but they are large in number, and there is a group of them. Thor, who lost the blessing of supernatural power, eventually fell into the sea of S.H.I.E.L.D. agent due to lack of physical strength. Under the tactics, he didn't even see the face of Mjolnir. It's also because he didn't see it, otherwise he would be as embarrassed as his brother Loki. Mjolnir. Does it look like this? As Thor's weapon, it is impossible for Loki not to know Mjolnir, but what is the extra piece? Could it be that something went wrong during the throw to Midgard? Loki, who came to Mjolnir by illusion, carefully looked at the hammer in the pit. He originally wanted to take advantage of Thor's exile and take Mjolnir away by himself, but now he sees this look of Mjolnir. Suddenly I don't want it anymore. Definitely, Loki just thought about it. For him, the satisfaction of being able to obtain Thor's weapon is beyond everything. Reaching out and grabbing the handle of Mjolnir's hammer, Loki drew it twice. Not moving. Well, it looks genuine. Loki had already anticipated his failure, so he was not particularly disappointed, but he became even more dissatisfied with Odin's eccentricity. Because his life experience has been concealed, Loki at the moment's mentality has changed a lot. As the god of lies and fraud, the most annoying definitely is to be deceived. This is a mockery of your own profession. Loki, who failed to lift Mjolnir, came to the place where Thor was temporarily held by S.H.I.E.L.D. At the moment Phil Coulson was interrogating him. Who are you? Why did you break in? Thor Odinson, son of Odin, I'm here to take my hammer. Thor, who had not touched Mjolnir, replied very cooperatively. It was also because he had been with Jane Foster and others for a while, and had a basic understanding of his current situation, otherwise he would not be like he is now. Be patient. Thor? Yes, some people call me that roar. Thor shrugged and looked nonchalant, but he was actually very proud of his reputation in his heart. So, why do you and your hammer appear on Earth? Because I made a big mistake. Thor's mood suddenly fell. My father Odin deprived me of my supernatural power and banished me to Midgard. I had to stay there until he forgave me. Here it is. Midgard. Phil Coulson has also made up for Norse mythology in the past few days, and he is no stranger to the word Midgard, definitely. Although I still feel a little unbelievable, in fact, Phil Coulson has already believed most of it. Observation of words is a basic skill for an agent. The guy in front of him who claims to be Thor has a very serious expression when he talks about these fairy tales. It doesn't seem to be lying, unless he is also an agent or a neurotic. If he is neurotic, it would be too coincidental, and the combat power that can easily overwhelm the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent is not fake. Although it is too weak compared to the legendary gods, Thor just said that he himself Odin's supernatural power has been taken away by Odin, and it still makes sense logically. So, is it you who appeared here 2 days ago? Phil Coulson continued to ask. 2 days ago. 2 days ago I was in the facility called the hospital. Thor shook his head and denied. After I was banished to Midgard, I was hit by your vehicle called a car. And then Jane and Eric sent me there. Are you talking about Jane Foster and Professor Eric Shavik? Phil Coulson quickly grasped the point. Yes, Jane said you took their equipment. I hope you can return it to him. This will give you the friendship from Thor. A silly smile appeared on Thor's face. Well, if you really are Thor, I will consider it. Phil Coulson touched his bald forehead, and began to doubt Thor's identity again. He felt that this guy in front of him might be Jane Foster and the others, who specially fooled around in order to deceive their equipment. But the necessary attempts are still necessary. Phil Coulson stood up and said, "Follow me." Thank you. You guys are not as unkind as Jane said. The familiar Thor followed Phil Coulson in 2 steps, slapped him on the back and said with a big grin. Phil Coulson glanced at Thor and didn't say much. Whether this Thor is Thor or a fool, or both, Phil Coulson doesn't need to care about him too much. bringing Thor to the place where Mjolnir was, and before Phil Coulson could speak, the impatient Thor jumped into the pit. Mjolnir. My old fellow. What's going on? Seeing a small piece of pipe appearing on the hammer inexplicably, Thor was furious, and he grabbed Phil Coulson by the collar. What did you do to my Mjolnir? Hey, don't get excited. Phil Coulson gesticulated the agent in the distance to lower his muzzle, while calming Thor in rage. This has nothing to do with us. Do you remember the person I said before? 2 days ago the hammer suddenly thundered, and a figure appeared in the thunder and lightning. When he disappeared, this little thing was on the hammer. How can it be? At a loss, Thor loosened Phil Coulson's collar, and Loki, who was hidden from his side, also looked in disbelief. Mjolnir is made of ulu metal. Few people can forge this metal except dwarf. Phil Coulson silently wrote down the information Thor accidentally revealed when he was absent. His response just now didn't seem to be false, but the possibility of Thor was higher again. Thor was sluggish for a while, and soon came back to his senses. No matter what Mjolnir has become, it is always his own weapon. It is nothing to add a small tube, and he will not dislike it. Thor stepped forward and grabbed the handle of Mjolnir's hammer, and gently lifted it up as usual. Well? The hammer didn't move. Thor strongly mentioned. The hammer still didn't move. With both hands on the handle of the hammer, Thor used the strength of the milk, and Mjolnir was still lying motionless on the ground, not giving him the master's face at all. I was disgusted by Mjolnir. Thor looked desperate. Ah. Brother is awake. When Kraft opened his eyes, he saw Alice's little worried face sticking to the glass of the survival capsule. Behind her, Martin Lee, Quinn, Beja, and his own figure. Oh, this is the Kraft robot Angela is controlling. As soon as he woke up, his mind was still a little confused, and Kraft froze for a while before recollecting it. Bah. The nutrient solution in the life-sustaining capsule was emptied, the lid slowly opened, and the naked Kraft crawled out of it, took the bath towel handed over by Alice and wiped his body, and Kraft wrapped it around. Up his waist. You kid. Isn't you always cautious? Martin Lee came forward and gave Kraft a brain collapse, cursing on his mouth, but the expression on his face was much more relaxed. Isn't this the first time I have come into contact with the power of the mysterious side? I was caught off guard? Kraft smirked and touched the back of his head. On the one hand, he didn't understand the power of the mysterious side. On the other hand, he was too confident in Dreamland technology, so he ignored the problem of abnormal phenomena between different systems. If it is the thunder and lightning induced by Thor using Mjolnir, it is actually not different from ordinary electric shocks. At most, the electricity is stronger. With the defense power of the Dreamland Warframe, even if it does not enter the insulation mode, it will not be harmed. But Kraft had directly shaped Mjolnir's body before. In a sense, he was forging artifacts. Even Dwarf used the neutron star furnace when building Mjolnir, such as Kraft. In the case of getting started directly, just being stunned for a few days is already a blessing. Unexpectedly, there really is Thor in this world. Martin Lee had long learned about the cause and effect from Angela, and even watched the entire process of Thor regaining Thor's power and fighting the destroyer armor through the pictures taken by the Banshee fighter plane that had stayed in New Mexico. There is a Monkey King on the other side of the ocean. It's normal to have a Thor here. Kraft expressed his calmness. After all, he has seen a lot of gods and ghosts in his dreams. It's just that his world has changed from pure technology to a mix and match style. It's no big deal. He completely ignored the awkward look he had when he first knew Mjolnir. Stop talking about this, you go and change your clothes, take a good rest for 2 days and then talk about it. Martin Lee just casually sighed. He has no interest in Thor or anything. Recently, the fight in Hell's Kitchen has been calming down. The Japanese hand club was beaten by Daredevil and several superheroes, and he was about to escape back to his hometown. Peter had a kick in it too. Now Martin is preparing for the trouble of sending people into the Hell's Kitchen again to find the Magia gang. Seeing that Kraft is no longer a problem, he does not plan to stay any longer, and took out the wormhole generator that Kraft had prepared for him. I have something to do on my side, so go ahead, and you will be more careful in the future. Don't accidentally get hurt all over your body. Martin Lee actually doesn't have much opinion about Kraft's involvement in these dangerous events. For one thing, he is not an opponent of Kraft's equipment, and he is sufficient to deal with most crises. Secondly, he thinks too much. These experiences are also good for Kraft, so he just reminded them, and didn't stop them. I know, you should be careful yourself. Now there are more and more people with special abilities. Even the mythical character like Thor has appeared. The ghost knows whether there will be a Demon King in the future. There really is a Demon King. What's the point of being careful? Martin Lee cursed with a smile, and then activated the wormhole generator. However, nothing happened. Quinn looked at Martin Lee, who was standing still, and said quietly, Can't you optimize the success rate of your teleporter? Martin Lee complained with a black line on his face. I can solve the problem of its random transmission. At least it won't send you to the women's toilet now. Kraft remembered the situation he encountered during the test, and replied with a black line on his face. Martin Lee was taken aback and blurted out, "Why delete this function?" Kraft Alice Angela Quinbia. Stare at, ahem, I'm busy. After several more presses on the wormhole generator, Martin Lee successfully summoned the portal, and then dived in. After Martin Lee left, Kraft changed his clothes and drank a little more chicken soup that Alice had stewed him, and then asked Angela to tune out what happened in New Mexico after he left. It turns out that the mysterious side also plays mecha. Looking at the huge armor that emits light from his face, Kraft sighed with regret, but unfortunately he was not there at the time. The metal on the armor must be very high level. If he were there, he would definitely find a way to do it. Get it? As for the so-called Thor's resurrection after he died, it made Kraft feel like he was watching a third-rate love TV series. It was essentially the same as the Hulk who was soothed by General Rose's daughter before. Speaking of which, when there is a problem with the human body experiment, the subject's temperament will change drastically. It is also very vulgar. After careful calculation, Kraft knows that there are 4 examples of Martin, Hulk, Dr. Lizard, and Osborn. Now, is this some kind of world rule? Kraft couldn't help thinking about it again, especially after seeing Thor after the resurrection. He got the large magic armor that looked invincible before, and that kind of third-rate emotion is even more obvious. In the end, the huge armored man who had been scrapped did not fall into the hands of the SHIELD agent who had long been eyeing, but simply disappeared out of thin air, leaving the SHIELD agent who was moving it to the car with a bewildered look. Sure enough, is the anti-theft function exclusive to the wizarding world? Kraft pulled his chin. Just like the other Mjolnir couldn't move it, this armored man didn't seem to be someone else's, so Kraft's regret was alleviated a lot. Turning off the video, Kraft looked silently at Alice who was wiping her tears. What's the point of crying? Huh? Brother, don't you think their love is touching? Ah. By the way, Alice likes watching soap operas like this. Kraft rubbed his forehead helplessly. He didn't know what to say to this robot sister who was more like a normal person than himself and Martin. What is this? Kraft, who rubbed his forehead, suddenly had a peculiar feeling. There seemed to be something inexplicable wandering around him. Angela, if you scan the entire laboratory, is there anything strange? Angela Yeon turned on various types of detectors and scanned the laboratory up and down. Brother, I didn't find anything weird. Maybe it's because your body hasn't healed and you have an illusion. I suggest you better go into the repair cabin and lie down for a while. But Kraft didn't think he had been hallucinated by thunder. Could it be that eye-awakening magical ability? Don't you all like to write like this in novels? After getting in touch with magical items such as artifacts, you get a special ability or something. Kraft subconsciously stretched out his palm to the open space on the side, and yelled, Hakuna Matata. Quinn. However, nothing happened. An awkward atmosphere spread in the laboratory, and Kraft quietly withdrew his hand. It looks like the spell is wrong. That sentence, isn't the line Meow and the Lion King? What kind of spell? Beja dangled his tail and wondered. Just like Quinn likes watching cats and mice, Beja has a soft spot for cartoons featuring cats as the protagonist. Ha ha ha. Really? Kraft laughed dryly and touched the back of his head awkwardly. No wonder my spell failed. Then, unwilling to give up, he tried several spells in his dreams, but unfortunately he still didn't respond, and the peculiar feeling disappeared. In other words, it was ignored by him. When Kraft focused his attention, he could still vaguely feel the existence of that kind of energy, but compared to the beginning, it was almost as if it did not exist. So this is the residual power of Mjolnir in me? Is it now dissipating? Although this is a guess, Kraft always feels that he has an inexplicable sense of familiarity with this situation, as if he had seen it somewhere. Right. AIM diffusion field. Kraft suddenly remembered the dream before waking up. Isn't this the process of the AIM diffusion field from being generated to gradually stabilizing after the successful development of super ability? Naturally, there is an instrument to detect the AIM diffusion field in the dream. With the help of Angela, Kraft quickly manufactured it. Really? Kraft scratched his head. He hadn't given himself a drug and electrified, so awakening succeeded? Could it be that when I was rubbing the hammer by myself before, that electrotherapy just met the requirements of ultra ability development? At present, I can only guess like this, but it's okay. The province has to conduct human experiments on himself. Although that level is acceptable to Kraft and there is no danger, accepting it does not mean not caring. It is naturally best to be able to skip this stage. But, what is my awakening ability? There are many abilities that appear in dreams, such as electric discharge, ice making, hair blowing, and psychokinesis. They can have obvious external expressions without formulas, and it is easy to know what you call personal reality. That is what super ability is. But there are some ability, such as tracking, analyzing, or controlling temperature, which have no obvious changes at the beginning, and need to be tested repeatedly to confirm. Craft's super ability has obviously been awakening, but there has been no obvious abnormality around it, which shows that his super ability should not be a conspicuous type. Fortunately, he watched a lot of experiments on the development of ultra ability in his dreams, and he also had a wealth of theoretical support for how to test this ultra ability development, like engineering, as directly dreaming of a whole system. Technology. Under the control of Angela, SCV quickly set up an experimental field dedicated to super ability testing in the mini-base, and then Craft made various attempts according to the method in the dream. What is the result of the attempt? It kind of made Craft dumbfounded. Because of his awakening's super ability, there are a lot of slots. According to the classification in the Academy City, Craft's super ability belongs to the additional attribute type, that is, the ability that can strengthen, weaken or die the target, and keep it warm. And Craft's awakening's ability is actually related to his another systematic dream. He can add the attributes of goblin technology, or gnome technology, to all mechanical items. In short, it is to improve the failure rate of machinery. And because his current ability is only LV.1, there are many restrictions when adding ability, and it takes a long time. Probably because I happened to be using the engineering ability before I was shocked? Craft scratched his head, guessing about the reason for his awakening ability. Also, okay. Although the inability to control the thunder and lightning flames like the mysterious side really disappointed Craft, he was more happy to be able to master a new kind of ability. After all, the development prospect of this ability is still good. For people like Iron Man who rely solely on equipment, it is definitely a natural enemy ability. But if Craft spends energy to develop this so-called super ability, he has no interest. Although after the official awakening, it is no longer necessary to spray drugs, stick electrodes, and pierce steel needles into the body, but if you want to develop further, you still have to spend a lot of time to continuously use ability, and in this process optimize the calculation formula when activating super ability. But with this time, is he not good at making mechas? Isn't he good to sleep, dream and learn technology? So Craft thought it would be nice to follow the fate. Putting this ability aside, which he named the Master Craftsman, Craft began to deal with the things he had accumulated during the time he was in a coma. First, it is about the dual plate that Dreamland Toys sold to Wizards of the Gathering, which developed Magic. Wizards of the Coast recently held a global Magic contest, and then in the finals, the dual plate produced by Dreamland Toys was shown, and then card game fans all over the world went crazy, on the official website of Dreamland Toys. There were so many petition posts that almost didn't make the server down. Are there so many fools who want to buy this shit? When Craft saw the information passed to him by Dreamland, he was really confused. According to the results of market research, the prospect of this thing is not lost to the company's current main mechanical warfare. In addition, Wizards of the Coast also sent a cooperation intention, hoping that Dreamland can develop more products that match their games. I don't understand. Craft scratched his head. He has never been interested in chess and card games, so he didn't understand why those people were so fanatical, but it is a bastard to have money and not make money. Anyway, this kind of projection technology does not require any special world rules. The auxiliary can also be produced, just hand it over to Angela. Next is Tony Stark, who is like a brown candy. After becoming Iron Man, this rich second generation is still an arrogant party, and such an arrogant person naturally does not want any dark history to fall into the hands of others, especially it was after I had no worries about my life. So he often came to harass Craft and tried every means to get Craft to delete the video of him being beaten by Bo Taijun. And after the last conversation, Tony Stark also realized that Craft did not seem to be a child with a sense of justice. Especially after learning about his past experience, Stark felt that he had to look at Craft. Don't let such a talented little guy go on a crooked path because of some extreme ideas. Therefore, Tony Kurt would also instill some positive energy thoughts such as spiritual chicken soup into Craft from time to time, and Craft was annoying. This time, he was the same as usual. While asking for the video, he also pulled some nonsense, back and forth to persuade Craft not to look at the problem so one-sidedly. Craft deleted the information as always, too lazy to care about him. Finally, there is information from Peter Parker. He explained to Craft about the current situation of Norman Osborn, and secretly accused Craft in his words, saying that if he was willing to treat Norman Osborn at that time, maybe he won't become Green Goblin. In fact, Craft also regretted this. Who would have thought that Norman Osborn, an old guy, could produce so many moths, and caused his own factory to suffer innocent disaster? Fortunately, Green Goblin attacked the factory at night, so except for a few night shifts who were injured, there were no casualties, otherwise Kraft would not let Norman Osborn so easily. But now it is impossible for him to help Osborn, anyway Green Goblin has been arrested. As for Harry Osborn, he was still too early to die anyway, so he was not in a hurry. Humph. He escaped again. Mr. Negatives, wearing the mask of the Heart Demon, pulled the negative energy sword out of a corpse, and glanced around at the scattered and struggling members of the Magia gang. Hurry up and get rid of them, let's rush to the next place. Yes. Following the order of the Negatives, the members of the Demon Gang accelerated their actions and learned about the lives of the Magian gang members who were the end of the war. A while ago, a superhero group called the League of Defenders appeared in Hell's Kitchen. Among the members are Daredevil and Jessica Jones, who have been active in Hell's Kitchen all year round, Iron Fist, the mysterious hero who has only recently appeared in Hell's Kitchen, and Misty Knight, one of the police officers in charge of Hell's Kitchen. In addition, there is a black hero, Luke Cage, who was previously active in Harlem. The reason they united to form the League of Defenders is to deal with the Shohahui and its partner Jinhee, which is conducting a large-scale population and drug business in the Hell's Kitchen. In order to fight against these superheroes with magical abilities, Jin also took the initiative to unite a group of super criminals with special abilities, including the Rhino Alexei, who had let Mr. Negative go down. But in this way, it would be difficult for the eldest hammer of the Magia gang to find someone to fight against Mr. Negatives of the Demon Gang, and Jin did not feel that the hammer and the ability of the Magia gang were not worth it for him to provoke the Devil Gang. So when the Magia gang asked him for asylum, they chose not to even see him. Mr. Negatives also seized this opportunity and rushed into the Hell's Kitchen with the Demon Gang and wrecked the area controlled by the Magian Gang. Now he has demolished few of the Magian Gang's residents. It's just that the Hammerhead is indeed slippery, and the Negatives have never been able to catch him. But as long as you continue to hit the station one by one, the hammer will always be unavoidable. Why don't we care about the Magian Gang and the Devil Gang? Luke Cage doesn't know much about Hell's Kitchen, so he is a little worried that the fight between the two gangs will affect their confrontation against Shohahui and Jinbin. As a police officer, Misty Knight actually wanted to unite with the rest of the Defenders League to solve these two gangs that also brought chaos to Hell's Kitchen. It's just that the issue of hand-to-hand union and Golden Union is more important, and Daredevil and others do not intend to make extravagances. The Demon Gang will not stay in Hell's Kitchen for a long time, Daredevil explained to Luke Cage. Although they don't know the reason, they only have enemies with the Magia Gang. They usually stay in Chinatown and in the Flushing area. This is a gang that mainly shelters Chinese descent, and the harm is very low. In that case, just ignore them, Spider-Man, who temporarily joined the League of Defenders, interrupted. I know the Flushing area. Under the management of the Demon Gang, the situation is actually pretty good. We don't need to give it. Find an enemy yourself. Spider-Man is right, the most important thing now is to deal with Shohahui. Daredevil's master stunned the crutches in his hand and agreed, saying that to him, any demon gang of Magia gangs is not as important as solving the hand-to-hand association. Luke Cage had no opinion on this, and Officer Misty was also persuaded by several people. Roar. Peter Parker secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It can be regarded as taking their attention away from Uncle Martin. As for why Peter Parker joined the League of Defenders camp, it was because Kraft secretly guided him. Martin Lee wants to run to the Hell's Kitchen to get revenge from the Magia gang. Naturally, Kraft also wants to contribute, but Martin does not want him to participate in the fight between the gangs, so Kraft also provides Martin with some intelligence support. For example, the locations of the strongholds of the Magian gang, as well as the abilities and identities of the special people in the Hell's Kitchen, and so on. But when he was sorting out the superheroes' information in Hell's Kitchen, Kraft suddenly discovered that he actually knew Daredevil, that is, Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer. When Kraft and Martin Lee were discussing their lives in Hell's Kitchen before, they were favored by Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer, and he still has a position of legal counsel on Martin's side. It's just not clear whether Matt knows that Martin is Mr. Negative. As for Kraft, his relationship with Matt is not very good. The main problem lies with Kraft, because he was very extreme at the time, and his inexplicable intuition made him vaguely feel what Matt was hiding. So Kraft's attitude towards the white lawyer at the time was not very good. No wonder I thought Matt had something wrong at the time, and thought he was hiding a knife and a smile with bad intentions. Now it seems that he is really just a good person. After discovering that he had misunderstood Matt Murdock, Kraft also felt a little embarrassed, so he asked Angela to help Matt several times in secret, and by the way led the enthusiastic young man Peter Parker to them. Help. Otherwise, they will be able to support most of the forces of Hell's Kitchen by joining hands with Jinwei and Jin. But Kraft's help is nothing more than that. In fact, he feels that the problem of Hell's Kitchen cannot be solved by those superheroes. Without America's official acquiescence, how could New York have such an impossible place? Under the influence of a variety of factors, Martin Lee's attack on the Magia gang this time was exceptionally smooth, and there was no decent resistance at all. After all, most of the ultra-ability criminals were collected by Jin and either intimidated or lured, and the lonely Hammerhead itself was just an ordinary human with an iron skull. Just as Mr. Negatives led him to show off on the Magia gang, Kraft also followed Angela's attention to the progress of the matter. Has the people behind them not appeared yet? After seeing the current situation of the Magia gang, Kraft frowned. Seeing that the Magian gang is about to cool down completely, the mysterious force that led the human experiment has still not appeared. It only shows that the Magian gang is not worth mentioning to them, and may have been broken a long time ago. Contacted. No, I haven't even noticed that the Magias have sought help from an unknown force. It seems that Hammerhead doesn't even know that there is such a force. Angela reported the situation there to Kraft. This is really hell. I can only wait for Martin to catch the hammer, and then interrogate it. But Kraft didn't have much hope for this. The Hammerhead didn't look like a loyal person. He had reached a point where life and death was at stake. He hadn't done anything yet. Either they didn't know it, or they were just a cooperative relationship at the time, and most of the forces used false identities. Hell's Kitchen, the only remaining resident of the Magian gang. Hammerhead. Joseph Harlow fell on a sofa very embarrassed. His suit was bloodstained in tatters, and there was a clear depression on the iron skull that had always made him proud. Damn. 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 Joseph Harrow roared and smashed the coffee table in front of him. As a result, the ashes and wine on the coffee table splashed, and some of it splashed on himself, making him look even more embarrassed. Joseph Harlow couldn't figure out why the Devil Gang, a gang who is not in the Hell's Kitchen, would stubbornly hold on to himself, and he didn't even care about it when he wanted to talk about it. Your attitude. Joseph. Let's run away, leave New York, leave America, go to Canada, go to Italy, or even go back to Russia. I don't believe that the Negatives can still go to Russia. An equally embarrassed Magian gang member suggested to Joseph Harrow. Most of the people who still remain in the Magia gang are the old people who followed Joseph Harrow to fight the world from the beginning, or the friends he knew in Russia and were brought to America to work hard together. The rest of the subordinates had already left the Magia gang after seeing the bad situation, and Joseph Harlow didn't have the ability and energy to pursue them at the moment. Did you let me escape back to the country in such a desperate way? Joseph Harrow's eyes were red, glaring at the proposed member. Otherwise, what should I do? Stay and fight with the Negatives? We have no chance of winning. The gang was not shocked by Joseph, but contradicted him without hesitation. He and Joseph are also old friends. They knew each other before Joseph changed their metal skulls, so they were not afraid of him at all. You're right. The expression on Joseph Harrow's face dimmed suddenly, and he fell slumped on the sofa, all his ambitions being pulled out with a sigh. He. Want to go now? It's too late. Accompanied by the sound of the negative film, the door of the room was kicked open, and the demon wearing a heart demon mask came in with the crowd surrounded by Mr. Film. Negatives. Joseph Harrow stood up, his eyes glaring at Martin Lee as if flames were about to be ejected. This should be. Martin slowly took off the mask on his face. Isn't it the first time to meet officially? Hammerhead. You? Are you? Martin Lee? Joseph Harrow did not recognize Martin's identity for the first time, but was recognized by a high-level Magian gang next to him. Martin Lee. After the high-level reminder, Joseph Harrow also recognized who the man with the anti-color filter was in front of him. Before, he only thought that Martin Lee was the moneybag of the Devil Gang, but he didn't expect Martin to be the film. You don't want to be your philanthropist. What are you doing to trouble me? After knowing the true identity of the Negatives, Hammer became more depressed. Because he was constantly attacked by the devil, he recently recalled all the people he had offended, even when he first came to America, in order to fill his stomach. The tramp who grabbed it didn't let it go either. But among them, there is absolutely no such person as Martin Lee. Ha. It seems that the Hammerhead is a nobleman who forgets things, but your men seem to have understood. Why not ask him? Martin Lee pointed to the man who recognized him at the first glance. At the moment he was looking at himself in horror, his legs shaking like chaff. Nikita. The Magia Gang senior named Nikita gave an ugly wry smile. Boss, do you remember the Viper Gang who came to us for cooperation more than 10 years ago? The Viper Gang. Haven't they been wiped out long ago? Joseph Harrow still has an impression of this name. After all, they gave him a lot of money. If he wasn't still fighting with other gangs at the time, he still wanted to be black and black, but it was a pity that he waited until he vacated him. With that hand, the Viper Gang had been wiped out long ago. In my impression, the collaboration at that time seemed to be an experiment. The rough Hammerhead was not interested, so he threw it to Nikita to deal with it. At that time, the Viper Gang asked us to help catch homeless people and conduct human experiments. Nikita's fear was probably gone, and her speech gradually became more organized. Later, the laboratory was attacked by mysterious characters and many people escaped. Martin Lee was one of them. I sent people to try to catch those who escaped, but many of them failed, and some even failed. People are gone forever. I think they should all die in your hands, right? Huh, who knows, I have killed so many people. Martin replied non-committal. Nikita was silent for a while and continued. And it happened that the Viper Gang was destroyed at the time, so I did not pursue the remaining fugitives. Seeing that Martin Lee was awarded the Medal of Freedom, I was still worried about him. Launched official forces to trouble us, but I didn't expect. Hee. Shaking his head and laughing bitterly, Nikita looked at the ugly negative. It looks like you should have gained special power in the experiment, but if you want to ask us about the Viper Gang, I'm sorry. We were purely cooperative at the time. 2 gangsters, where did you get such advanced equipment? I don't know. Those were provided by the Viper Gang. We were not the only ones conducting human experiments. Alexei's rhino hide was also covered during that time. He probably knew that he was going to die, and Nikita had nothing to hide. Their demise is also very strange. The people in the gang died almost overnight. We don't even know who the murderer was. But it's normal for you to kill me and I kill you in Hell's Kitchen, and no one will go back to check. Nikita's wry smile turned into a miserable smile. It seems that we are probably being used as a guise. In this case. You have no value anymore. The clues were almost cut off, making Martin Lee feel upset. He waved his hand and created dozens of negative energy spears out of thin air, projecting them at the members of the Magia Gang in the house. I'm fighting with you. The hammerhead Joseph Harrow wanted to stand up, but Martin took care of him and he was directly pierced into a sieve. Withdraw. Martin Lee looked at the corpses in the house indifferently, put the inner demon mask back on his face, and left the Hell's Kitchen with his men. So you still haven't been able to find the man behind the scenes? After listening to Martin's account, Kraft's mood was not very good. The Magia Gang was just a top pick. If you didn't find the person who controlled the Viper Gang to kill, it would not be revenge at all. We can only continue to investigate slowly. At least we now know that the man behind the scenes was probably using the power of the gang to conduct large-scale human experiments. If we follow this clue, we should be able to gain something. Martin Lee can only comfort Kraft and himself in this way. In fact, he didn't have much hope in return. From the situation of the Viper Gang, it can be seen how cautious this man behind the scenes is doing things. It's just a trace. Do not stay. Kraft returned to the room with serious concerns. He didn't even have the mind to sleep because of the Maggie's gang. Changed into his pajamas and covered the quilt, Kraft, who got into the quilt, looked at the ceiling, thinking about how to use the only clue to track down the dark behind the scenes. The next morning, as soon as Kraft awakening came, it was a carp that turned over from the bed. Sure enough, you can't sleep well in case of trouble. There is no problem that Dreamland technology can't solve. Now I see where you can escape. There was a reason Kraft was so excited, because he dreamed of time. Between machine, device. In all kinds of science fiction works, the time machine can be said to be a frequent visitor, so since knowing that he can dream of cats and mice, Kraft has wondered whether he will dream of a certain science fiction one-day time machine. So isn't it here? Although its creator is a bit hard to say. It is Dr. Normaki Chibe from Penguin Village. But what can Kraft say? People made a time machine. No logic in the world. Breaking Sound, the time machine made by Zawan Chibe, was named Time Skateboard by him. The main body is divided into 2 parts, namely the time clock and the smoothboard. The light skateboard has nothing to say, it's just a platform for the time clock to launch the shuttle of time and space. The time clock is a small robot in the shape of an alarm clock. On the back of its body, there is a dial like an old phone to determine the time distance you want to traverse. If you want to traverse 500 years, dial 500 and press or pull up the button on its head, press to go back to the past, pull up to go to the future. With a time machine, Kraft only needs to go back 8 years ago to find out what happened to the Viper Gang back then. Without further ado, Kraft directly teleported to the laboratory, and then asked Angela to manipulate the Kraft robot he had made before back to the residence, continuing to pretend to go to school normally, while he himself was clanging in the laboratory. Make a time skateboard. Juan Chibe's time skateboard looks simple, but it is quite troublesome to make, especially the invention of this illogical world basically requires Kraft to do it himself, and his mini-factory can't help at all. So when the time skateboarding is finished, it is already the night of the next day. Attaching the time clock to the smooth board, Kraft was not in a hurry to cross, he still had to do some preparations. In many science fiction works related to the time machine, there are also many discussions about various paradoxes, such as not being able to meet with the past self, not being able to change the history that you know, and so on. Kraft doesn't know whether these fantasies are real, but he still thinks some of the logical paradoxes make sense. For example, you can't meet your past self because you have never seen your future self. If you cross the past and meet yourself this time, you will have a logical paradox, or from that moment on, you will have a different parallel universe. No matter what the real situation is, Kraft thinks it is better to be steady, so he first disguised himself. Not to mention high-tech camouflage equipment such as holographic masks. Even in ancient times, there were magical props similar to human skin masks, so it was not difficult for Kraft to change its appearance. Then there are self-defense equipment. Obviously the used ones such as Bo Taijun and Kshatriya are not suitable for use in the past. The shape of the Ultraman battlesuit is closer to the steel battlesuit and passes lost. The Dream battlesuit may be used frequently in the future. No, picking and picking. Kraft chose the Ghost battlesuit, which is the same as SCV. The Ghost battlesuit's bonus to its own ability is not high, but it's not a big problem. Adding 2 Dr. Ali's electric current stimulation devices is basically enough. The defense problem is also easy to solve. Kraft has so many materials in his hand, just change it to a better one, not to mention the equipment that can open energy defense shields like an invincible belt. In addition, Ghost battlesuit originally came with its own stealth function. Although the original version requires the activation energy psionic craft, it is not difficult to replace the energy. In fact, the invisible force field installed on the Dreamland battle armor is from Ghost. The battlesuit is improved here. After the own equipment is resolved, it is necessary to prepare the means to trace the clues. Kraft directly reduced Angela's duplication, a supercomputer based on Umbrella, and added part of the Skynet and Matrix technology, and shrunk it into his pocket along with its energy supply. There are also a series of transportation tools such as the reduced Banshee fighter, Martian Mouse motorcycle, a new Sun submarine, and a group of Harrows used to assist in the operation of these equipment, which were also reduced by Kraft and carried on him. It took Kraft 2 more days for the finishing time. Brother, are you going to fight? Angela, the electronic life, couldn't pass it a bit, and she spit out. It's always good to be prepared. When Angela said that, Kraft felt that his preparations seemed a bit exaggerated, but they were all prepared, and there was no need to put them back. Coming to the time skateboard that had been placed aside for several days, Kraft turned on the time clock, then dialed the number 8, pressed the button on its head, and placed it on the smoothboard. Because Kraft doesn't know exactly when the cooperation between the Magia Gang and the Viper Gang started, it's better to start from the direction of the destruction of the Viper Gang directly around the time when he escaped from the Magia Gang. Survey. With a slight beep, the time clock moved. Hi. The time clock, awakened by the first activation, bowed to Kraft. It's a great honor for you to take this train. My name is Time Skateboard, and I am the tour guide of Time Travel Agency. Then the guy did not know where he touched a lollipop and handed it to Kraft. This lollipop is a little bit of your heart, please use it slowly. Kraft silently took the lollipop and put it into his mouth. Although he had seen it once in a dream, he was still speechless at the moment. Although most of the science and technology in my dreams are quite unscientific, the product of this illogical world is the most unscientific. This lollipop is pretty sweet. Then, the wonderful journey of time is about to begin. The time clock assumed a starting position on the smooth board. Are you ready? Kraft quickly sat down on the smooth board and used the climbing function on the battlesuit to firmly fix himself on the smooth board. During the previous test in Dreamland, the protagonist of Dreamland Chinbei was not on the smooth board, so Kraft didn't know what would happen when traveling through time and space. However, seeing that the little robot girl named Areli can return safely, she also brought back Urashima Taro's treasure box. There is no danger when she wants to travel through time and space. Kraft did this just as a precaution. 1. Then again, the Japanese really like to make robots like humans. Time clock's arms were raised high, and the toes stretched out and shouted, and then rushed forward. Call out. Within 2 steps, the time clock slipped and fell onto the smooth board. Then the time travel begins. This is, I can't tell. Kraft, who was sitting on a smooth board and shuttled through the time tunnel, clutched his forehead. Even if he had gradually become accustomed to Dreamland technology, his mood was very complicated for this kind of trivial way of traveling through time and space. With the sound of boom, Kraft ran out of the time tunnel on a time skateboard. 8 years ago. Without waiting for the introduction of time clock, Kraft directly reduced the time skateboard and put it in his pocket, and then looked around vigilantly. However, he found that the people around him were doing their own things as if they couldn't see him. Don't worry, this is a mirrored space, no one will notice your existence. The space in front of Kraft's eyes was like a shattered mirror. The scenery was divided into unruly fragments, and then a woman with a bare head walked out of it. Seeing the woman's weird way of going on stage and the plain robe on her body, Kraft's thoughts turned 1,000 times. From the styling point of view, this bald woman does not look like a scientist, and she knows that there are such existences as Monkey King and Thor in this world, so the mirror space she said is probably from the mysterious side. The product. Wait. Bald? Add that suit. I am not a monk, nor a nun. The bald woman said in a slightly helpless tone before Kraft spoke. Kraft's mouth opened slightly and his eyes rounded. I don't know much about mind reading, the bald woman interrupted Kraft again. It's just that on other timelines, you basically start with these two questions when we meet for the first time. In fact, you really haven't changed at all. Kraft. His own speech was interrupted twice in a row, but Kraft didn't feel any irritation, because his attention was all attracted by the words of the bald woman in front of him. Although she changed her appearance, the bald woman in front of her still knew she was Kraft Lee, and she also said the special term, timeline. And Kraft only came through time and space 8 years later, so she is unlikely to be a liar, because Kraft at this point in time is still suffering in the lab of the Magia Gang. So you are? Supreme Magician, Ancient One. After the bald woman reported her home, she smiled and beckoned to Kraft, and said, let me come, I will explain to you slowly, you are not in a hurry to find those who cheat you at this time. As she said, she stretched out her right hand and drew a circle in front of her, and a circular portal surrounded by orange sparks appeared in front of Kraft, and then she didn't wait for Kraft to ask more, Ancient One just walked in first. I even know the purpose of traveling through time and space. Kraft's instinct did not find any malice in Ancient One, and she looked like she was very familiar with herself. Coupled with a lot of equipment on his body, Kraft didn't think it was a big deal to keep up. So he walked forward and went through the orange light gate with Ancient One. Welcome to Kamar Taj, Kraft. Wow, Kraft turned his head and looked around. Angela in his pocket was already working. She quickly located where they are now, Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. From America to Nepal, although the wormhole generator can also achieve this transmission distance, it needs to make a coordinate positioning device at the target location in advance, and the wormhole generator can only create a one-way portal, plus with such a long distance, given the instability of dwarf technology, the success rate is probably very touching. But the Supreme Magician, who calls himself Ancient One, can draw a circle and summon a two-way portal. Kamar Taj is fortunate to say, after all, it is her base camp, but when Kraft traveled through time and space, she always did not. Maybe it was deliberately prepared, right? Although based on Ancient One's previous statement, she seemed to be able to predict her appearance in advance, but to make preparations in advance to make herself amazed, that would be too fussy. And whether Ancient One has prepared in advance or can teleport at will, her portal is much sharper than the wormhole generator of gnomish technology. Sure enough, the space-time advantage of the mysterious side is greater than that of the technology side. In his dreams, Kraft had seen all kinds of big men playing with time and space. In terms of quantity, the mysterious side was overwhelming. It is definitely necessary to exclude those in the illogical world in advance. This group of people are outside the theory and cannot be compared together. A drink. Ancient One handed a cup over, and Kraft reached out and took it. Tea. Kraft glanced at the liquid in the cup and frowned slightly. Although he is of Chinese descent and likes his own culture very much, he can't drink even tea. Just when he was about to decline, Ancient One interrupted him again. Try it, you will like it. Alright. Kraft raised his eyebrows, put the cup to his mouth and took a sip. The aroma is indistinguishable from other teas, and the taste is slightly bitter. But then, a cool breath began to spread from the tip of Kraft's tongue, with a trace of what other people said, but Kraft had never felt the return, making him refreshed. Kraft raised the cup again and drank the tea inside. I said you would like it, Ancient One smiled on his face, this is especially for you. Okay. Kraft put the cup in his hand on the table aside, can you tell me exactly what's going on? I'm still at a loss. Definitely, Ancient One nodded, led Kraft to walk outside, and said as he walked, this is Kamar Taj, my residence, and the place where most magicians on the planet study. The two walked outside, and a group of people with the same plain clothes but different skin colors were discussing each other in the square. Magician. Seeing the group of roar who fists or clubs together, Kraft looked suspiciously at Ancient One. Yes, magician. Ancient One smiled and nodded and explained to Kraft. Kamar Taj's spells are indeed different from the spells you know, but we are indeed magicians. At this time, someone in the field has drawn an orange fire between his hands, blessing the weapons in his hands, are directly forming weapons of different shapes to continue the fight. Oh. This form of magic. Kraft knows it, isn't it a melee magician, he hasn't seen it before. Although it was only seen in a dream, the old man named Gandalf was playing more fiercely than the group of guys in front of him. Our magician's duty is to maintain the normal operation of the world and keep some external threats out of the earth. At the same time, as the Supreme Magician, I also have a duty to guard an artifact called the Eye of Agamotto. Ancient One continued to introduce Kraft to Kamar Taj and his own situation. So, because I traveled through time and space, do you plan to send me back? Or do you want to ask me about my crime? Kraft quietly opened a two-step distance. In many sci-fi works and his own dreams, there are organizations like the Space-Time Administration to prevent others from disturbing time. But before the truth is found out, Kraft Special does not intend to give up. Definitely not, Ancient One chuckles. You use the time machine to travel through time and space. This is part of the world, so don't get excited. Kamar Taj can't stand your toss. After comforting Kraft, Ancient One went on to say, I can know you because the artifact I mentioned earlier, Eye of Agamotto, has the power of time. By relying on it, I can always see something interesting in the long river of time. Thing. Ancient One blinked at Kraft. Like you. Eye of Agamotto? An artifact that can control time? Kraft didn't care about Ancient One's ridicule, but was very interested in the Eye of Agamotto in her mouth. Yes, do you want to see it? Definitely. Ancient One looked familiar with his future self, and Kraft wouldn't regard himself as an outsider. So led by Ancient One, the two came to a house full of books, and a man wearing a Kamar Taj gown greeted him. Supreme Magician. Thank you, Goodbody Magician. The magician named Goodbody took a look at Kraft, nodded to Ancient One, and left the room. Ancient One took Kraft to the innermost part of the room. On a cylindrical stone platform staring at a plate, there was a necklace carved with strange patterns and shaped like an eye. This is it. Ancient One's fingers lightly touched the Eye of Agamotto, and as the outer metal ring slowly turned, the metal ball in the middle opened up and down like an open eye, revealing a gem emitting green light. Eye of Agamotto. It is actually a time gem, one of the 6 infinite gems. Its ability is just like its name. It is a gem that can control time. The green gem slowly floated to Ancient One and held it up. On the palm of his hand, I occasionally use it to view the past and the future, but in fact it is not a pleasant experience. Ancient One is admonishing Kraft, if anything, not to rely too much on the time machine. It's a pity that Kraft didn't understand the meaning of Ancient One. Instead, he stared at the time gem in Ancient One's hands and was eager to try it. If you could study such a magical thing, it would be nice if you could not study it. Well. Ancient One smiled, stretched out his hand and pushed the time gem in front of Kraft. Kraft was not polite. He reached out to take the time gem and played with it, and took out some kind of device from time to time to face the time gem. One pass operation. Being interested in time gem is on the one hand, and on the other hand, Kraft wanted to see how tolerant Ancient One is to him. In the face of Kraft's somewhat rude behavior, Ancient One did not stop her. She allowed Kraft to do whatever she wanted to time gem, and she didn't seem to worry about what effect Kraft could have on time gem. I don't know if she is really at ease with herself, or if she has seen that she can't get the time gem. Thinking that Ancient One was able to observe the existence of the timeline, Kraft realized that his temptation seemed meaningless, so he stopped what he was doing. So you knew I would come here from the future? No, your future is very magical. It changes almost every day. Even if you observe the same you at the same point in time, there may be a completely different future from before. Especially after you fall asleep, the future is simply a slice of chaos. Ancient One took a deep look at Kraft, and it seemed that she also knew something about Kraft's dreams. So I can't predict when you will appear at all. It is only because of the disturbance of your time machine over the long river that Eye of Agamotto has noticed the strangeness, and I will appear there. My future. Kraft thought for a while, and it was obviously meaningless to fight a prophet, so he simply asked his doubts directly. Is our relationship going well in the future? You don't even hesitation to put this kind of magical thing in my hand. Are you not afraid that I will run away with it? Kraft shook the time gem in his hand. Although he has not succeeded in stimulating the ability of time gem so far, Kraft still has the confidence to run with it. Ancient One hooked her finger, and the time gem in Kraft's hand floated back into her hand. While putting the gem back into the Eye of Agamotto, she said, Our relationship. That's not good. There are too many possibilities, and different possibilities will extend to different timelines. Ancient One's hands flicked to the top for a few times, and an orange galaxy phantom appeared in the air. As her fingers moved, small tributaries were scattered from it. In some timelines we are enemies with each other, in some timelines we are comrades in arms, and even in a certain timeline, you inherited the name of Kamar Taj's Supreme Magician. Me? Supreme Magician? Kraft pointed to his nose and looked shocked. He couldn't learn so many magics in his dreams, so he could still become the Supreme Magician? As I said, Kamar Taj's spells are not the same as you think, and the abilities you have in different situations seem to be different. Putting away the phantom in midair, Ancient One said with a smile. Okay, so I can also learn the spells on your side? Definitely, as long as you want. Ancient One smiled and said, "But you want to rely on Kamar Taj's spells to make magic items of other systems. It is very unlikely. You will have failed a lot in the future. Time again." I will tell you everything in the future. Kraft feels a bit difficult. This kind of prophet role is the most troublesome. She knows everything, but she doesn't know anything about her. You didn't say it, but as long as you get acquainted with you, it's not hard to guess, is it? Kraft grinned. There is nothing wrong with Ancient One's words. Although he would not actively tell people he trusts, he would not have the habit of deliberately covering up. In addition, Ancient One can observe the time. It is not difficult to guess. So those magical creations have nothing to do with me, right? Kraft was a little bit lost. He still wondered when he would solve this problem and come to a royal sword flight or something. Although he can now use technology to achieve similar means, it feels completely different. That's not true. Ancient One shook his head slightly. There are several of you who will find a solution in the future, and there is more than one way. Do I need to tell you? Since you can observe the timeline, you should understand that I will definitely not let you spoiler. Kraft said angrily, since the future self can succeed, there is no reason why he will fail. He doesn't want to lose to the future self. There was an inexplicable sense of victory or defeat in Kraft's heart. And he usually watches TV series and the like. The most annoying thing is that someone has spoilers. Spoilers must die. I just asked. Ancient One smiled sharply, matching her mysterious aura as the supreme magician, revealing a strange charm. Even Kraft, who has always been a little careless, felt that Ancient One's every move was inexplicably handsome, which made him have the urge to imitate. However, after replenishing the effect of what he did, Kraft decisively gave up. Without the blessing of the mysterious temperament, the behavior of imitating Ancient One looked like a fool. But to let him stay and learn magic to cultivate a mysterious temperament, Kraft refused. After knowing that Kamar Taj's spells were not helpful to the magical creation of dreams, he was not too interested. After all, although it is convenient to use spells, the time for learning cannot be short. Kraft is still busy looking for the people behind the scenes, but there is not so much time spent here. It is a big deal to come back to Nepal after returning. Find Ancient One. Well, if there is nothing else, I will leave first. Now that the situation was almost understood from Ancient One, Kraft planned to leave here to investigate the man behind the scenes. I'm not going to stop you from investigating behind the scenes, but there is one thing you should pay attention to. Ancient One put the Eye of Agamotto back on the stone platform. Don't make things too much, after all. This is just your past, interfering too much. More is not good for you. Definitely, in many science fictions, there has never been less discussion of time. I will pay attention. Even if Ancient One doesn't say anything, Kraft doesn't plan to do anything to those behind the scenes in this timeline. Then let me see you off. Ancient One's right hand began to circle again, and an orange-red light door opened in front of Kraft's eyes. Through the portal, Kraft saw that the other end was not where he was when he first arrived here, but at a certain place. Inside a building. This is the residence of the Viper Gang, or do you want to go to the Magia Gang first? No, it's fine here, thank you. Kraft nodded at Ancient One in thanks, then stepped into the portal. I look forward to seeing you next time, Kraft. As Ancient One's voice fell, the portal behind Kraft quickly closed, and Angela's reminder came from the headset, letting him know that he was back in New York again, and the location was definitely in the area of Hell's Kitchen. Tisk. Magic is really easy to use. Ancient One's hand operation confirmed Kraft's previous guess that her portal can really be opened anywhere at will. Other spells don't matter. This portal is worth learning. After learning it, you don't have to use the dwarf technology. You have to look at your face every time you use it, which makes yourself angry. The colleague who was planning to go back in his heart, Kraft opened the invisible force field of the ghost battlesuit, and his figure disappeared into the air under the encroachment of the blue light. Go. Let me figure it out for me. He took out several stealth detection machines for reconnaissance from his pockets, and let Angela and Harrow control them to disperse. Soon, the overall three-dimensional map of the Viper Gang's residence site appeared in front of Kraft's eyes. After collecting the information, the top executives of the Viper Gang are in these places. Angela marked the location of the top of the Viper Gang with red dots on the three-dimensional map. There are some who are not in the resident, and their boss is not there. So far, it seems to be just a very ordinary Hell's Kitchen Gang organization. Have you found their database? They're just a gangster, brother. Angela's tone was a little helpless. How could this group of crude people build a database? At most things like ledgers, but they are usually placed in the bank. Moreover, electronic information products in this era have not been popularized. I can't find a few devices to start the invasion, and the performance of the devices here is too low, and my actions are very restricted. Angela is also quite depressed about her ability being restricted due to environmental issues. Am I going to spend some time with them here? Kraft also had a headache about this. Take me to the Viper Gang boss's room first. Even if these gangsters like to put things like ledgers in the bank, there are still many people who have the habit of storing them separately or keeping a copy. Some things are hidden in their boss's room. Following the route marked by Angela, Kraft easily touched the room of the Viper Gang boss without encountering a single person. It's just that at the moment is outside his room, and there are 2 guards in black suits and sunglasses standing at night. It looks like it's right. Kraft was not surprised and rejoiced. If the boss of the Viper Gang didn't hide anything in the room, there would be no need to arrange a guard at all. Directly using the shrinking lamp to make himself smaller, Kraft swaggered in from under the crack of the door. Take out a scanning device from the props bag and scan the entire room up and down. Kraft easily found the hidden compartments hidden in the room, as well as the very old-fashioned ones, hidden behind an abstract painting. Safe. A few hidden compartments are nothing special, they can be opened easily after knowing the location, and there is nothing special inside. 2 pistols, a few bullets, a safe key, a small book with special symbols to record certain information, and a stack of boat photos taken by the Viper Gang boss and his mistresses. Simply unsightly. Kraft curled his lips and threw the pile of photos aside. If it were Fatty Liao, he would like it very much, but he was not interested. Although at this age, Kraft will subconsciously look at these photos more subconsciously, and there will be a little change in the body, but it is just a very ordinary physiological reaction, not a big deal. Kraft put away the codebook that he didn't know what to use, and took the key to the safe to the front of the abstract painting, and removed the canvas that was blocking the front, exposing the safe behind. Although he had the key in his hand, Kraft didn't know the unlock code, and the codebook had no clear direction. It was impossible to crack it in a short time. What's more troublesome is that this safe 8 years ago did not use electronic locks, but mechanical locks. Angela couldn't do anything if she wanted to invade. The easiest way is definitely to destroy the cabinet door directly. Kraft just takes out a lightsaber and stabs it twice. It's just that he suddenly wanted to use a different method. Kraft stretched out his palm and stuck it on the safe. Super ability. Master Craftsman, launch. It took about 10 minutes before Kraft added the attributes of dwarf technology to the safe in front of him. He. Kraft rubbed his hands and rotated the dial on the safe at will. Boom. After turning it twice, the door of the safe popped out. Kraft quickly reached out and grabbed the door of the flew out, gently set it aside, and then looked into the safe. The first thing that catches the eye is a bunch of glittering gold products, gold bars, gold coins and gold jewelry. The boss of the Viper Gang deserves his skin color. Kraft doesn't know anything else, but the black people in America are always there as a special preference for gold. Uncertainly shrunk the gold in front of him and put it in his pocket. Kraft continued to look at the items in the cabinet. Some small bags filled with white powder, you can know what they are with your knees, and toss them aside. Several boxes of videotapes with paper strips, from the words, Jenny Sally, cruise ship, on the paper strips, and the photos just seen in the dark. Kraft also roughly guessed what was inside. Throw it away. The 2 boxes of cigars are not known where they came from, but they will be placed in the safe by the Viper Gang boss. They should be good things and can be given to Martin and taken away. After moving away some odds and ends, Kraft finally found a ledger and a file bag at the bottom of the safe. The ledger has nothing to look at. Put it aside first, and Kraft opened the file bag, which contained some data about human experiments. According to the information obtained from these materials, in addition to the Magia Gang, there are 2 other gangs conducting human experiments on the Viper Gang. However, which power is behind the Viper Gang? Kraft is still confused. Water. There is no way, I can only use Plan B. Kraft sighed. He didn't want to spend too much time with the Viper Gang. So under Angela's operation, several invisible reconnaissance planes began to attack some lonely Viper Gang members, stunned them, and these targets were naturally included outside the door. Those 2 guards who knew nothing. Kraft took out a gold watch he had put away before, spent a few minutes adding a goblin technology buff to it, and then put it in the safe. After doing all this, Kraft reduced himself, got into a Banshee fighter that was also reduced, flew to the corner of the room and waited quietly. After a while, with the sound of boom, the gold watch in the safe exploded decisively. A member of the Viper Gang ran over following the sound, and found the guard who had been stunned. Not good. Someone invaded. The Viper Gang's resident area suddenly became chaotic, and the boss of the Viper Gang also received a notice from his subordinates and hurried back in a short time. End. It's over. Seeing that his safe was opened, the boss of the Viper Gang changed a lot. He hurriedly rushed to the safe and checked the contents. When he found that the file bag containing the experimental data was missing, he had a face. He sat down on the ground in despair. Boss, are you okay? The subordinate next to him was unknown, so he still wanted to behave in front of his boss, walked up to him and asked intently, and swears loudly. Don't worry. I will definitely find the little mouse who came to steal the boss's stuff, then peel the skin and cramp, and let me know what the consequences will be if we provoke our Viper Gang. Shut up. The Viper Gang boss slapped his hand and knocked the man with the big mouth to the ground. After knowing that his safe was stolen, the Viper Gang boss's first reaction was to conceal it, but he was suddenly shouted out by this big mouth. How could he not be annoyed? Although he also knew that the fact that his safe was stolen could not be covered up, and his actions were purely to anger, but as the spokesperson of Hydra, he knew how terrifying the mysterious force behind him was. Yes, so even if he knew he was bound to die, he still had a glimmer of unrealistic hope. No. I had to run away. The Viper Gang boss suddenly calmed down after panicking, and regardless of the surprised-looking subordinates around him, he rushed outside with his head down. Boom. With a gunshot, the boss of the Viper Gang fell at the door of his room. Behind him, an ordinary gang was holding a pistol, and a pistol of smoke was slowly wafting from the muzzle. What are you doing? The rest of the gang drew out their weapons, but some of them did not aim their guns at the gang who killed the Viper Gang leader. Huh. The gang who shot the gun did not show a scared expression in the face of the many guns pointed at him, but sneered, and shouted together with the other gangs who did not aim their guns at them, Hydra hail. Subsequently, gunfire broke out in the camp of the Viper Gang. Hydra. The name Kraft is familiar. After all, America has to promote Captain America every 3 days. As Captain America's opponent and absolute villain, Red Skull and his Hydra are also widely known. Even a guy like Kraft who has no interest in Captain America can often hear people around him discussing these topics. However, aren't these guys wiped out during World War E? Hydra has a slogan, cut off one head and grow 2 heads. Obviously they are not so easy to be solved, and they were not eliminated during World War E. After that, countries still spend money. It took a lot of time to eradicate their remaining forces. Angela said in the headset. Tisk, that Captain America is not very reliable either. Kraft whispered. In fact, he also knew the difficulty of eradicating a huge and fanatical organization. He was pure anger. If Hydra was cleaned up, he would not be caught for experimentation. Wait. So the Viper Gang will be destroyed, but it's actually because of me? As the gunfire in the Viper Gang's residence gradually subsided, Kraft suddenly recalled. Well, it's a bit of a time paradox. Couldn't it be me who attacked the Magia Gang and caused Martin and I to escape successfully? Because Time Skateboard can only adjust the year, but can't control the date, Kraft doesn't know what's going on with the Magia Gang now, and he was in a state of confusion when he escaped, and he didn't have any impression of the specific date. However, according to the information from Martin's interrogation, the destruction of the Viper Gang and the attack on the Magia Gang should be about the same time. So it is very likely that I did it myself. Hurry up. Angela, let's hurry to the experimental base of the Magia Gang. If Martin and I can't escape at this time, the fun will be great. Okay brother, but where is the experimental base of the Magia Gang? Kraft, who was in a daze at the time, definitely couldn't remember the specific location, even if he wanted to ask people in the know. The members of the Viper Gang have been wiped out by Hydra at this time. Ah. My head hurts. Kraft covered his forehead with a depressed face. In fact, it's not impossible to secretly tie a Hydra member to torture it. It's just that Hydra, as an evil organization that can be chased and intercepted by various countries, can still be mixed up. God knows that it has something to do with them now. When I go back, what will change? The most troublesome thing about the butterfly effect is its uncertainty. Why don't you go to Ancient One and ask? Kraft rubbed his chin, and then thought of the mysterious Supreme Magician. This guy. Once he knows the means to predict the future, he will involuntarily want to cheat, even for people like Kraft who hate spoilers. No, 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 if Ancient One also said before, the future related to me is full of uncertainty, regardless of whether this is true or false, if after seeing the future, she feels that she needs to tell me, it would already be tell me. Kraft didn't think Ancient One had the need to deliberately deceive herself. If she wanted to conceal it, she could not show up from the beginning. Predicting the behavior of a prophet is a thankless thing, because the prophet has already seen through all your behaviors. So think of it yourself. Kraft struggled for a long time, but gave up his plan to ask Ancient One for inquiries. Brother, I think we don't need to look for it. Just when Kraft was about to sneak a Hydra for interrogation, Angela's voice suddenly came from the earphones. After discovering that all the Viper Gang had been killed by Hydra, Kraft made two-handed preparations and sent a group of unmanned reconnaissance aircraft out to find the experimental base of the Magia Gang. I found it so soon? Kraft was pleasantly surprised. I found it. Angela's tone was a little hesitation. I will cut the picture directly to show you. Inside the reconnaissance plane where Kraft was located, the scene of Hell's Kitchen appeared on the screen. Several places were fighting, gunfire explosions and people's roar shouts intertwined, and the scene was chaotic. What's happening here? It's also a coincidence that S.H.I.E.L.D. recently discovered that these gangs are conducting human experiments, and they plan to pretend to be an attack by an unknown force, wanting to provoke the people behind these gangs. Today is just the time to launch a raid on them. Because the technology of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is still called the country, is far above average, it is easier for Angela to gather intelligence from them. Especially, in order to find the man behind the scenes as soon as possible, Kraft deliberately granted the wireless intrusion permission to Angela before that, so Angela had already known S.H.I.E.L.D.'s plan of action this time. So even if I don't come, the Viper Gang can't escape death? Theoretically. With the decisiveness demonstrated by Hydra before, even without Kraft, they would inevitably kill the Viper Gang based on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s investigation alone. Now that S.H.I.E.L.D. is already attacking Magia's gang, Kraft doesn't have to do anything more, but he is not so anxious to go back to the future to find Hydra to settle accounts. A tracker casually sent a reconnaissance plane to hang behind to see if they can track their lair. In fact, Kraft is not sure whether this will work, but he has to try it. Then Kraft discovered a very interesting thing. After the group of Hydra members left, they quickly divided into two groups. One group of people boarded the vehicles they had prepared and quickly left the Hell's Kitchen. But another group of people changed their clothes, and then joined the team that attacked other gangs. What's happening here? Kraft blinked, and some did not react. It was really collusion between officials and bandits. When S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded, it absorbed the scientists from Hydra that were defeated at the time. Angela explained to Kraft that this information was not a secret. It was even mentioned in the official Captain America comics, but Kraft didn't pay attention to it. So what about this S.H.I.E.L.D. was infiltrated from the beginning? Kraft said with a black line on his face. It's no wonder that Hydra has not been cleaned up for so many years. The feelings have already penetrated into the enemy. It looks like we are a step late. Not long after, the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. also came to the Viper Gang, led by Kraft's old acquaintance, history professor, Melinda May, and the bald-headed agent in charge of the hammer. Well, he is not considered bald at this time, he can only say that his hairline is slightly higher. A group of agents rummaged through the Viper Gang's residence site and took away all the clues they could find, including those photos and videotapes. It's a pity that the really valuable things were taken away by Kraft a long time ago, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent only found a lonely search in the end. I seem to be pulling them back. Kraft scratched his head, then the corners of his mouth crooked. But who cares? Regardless of those S.H.I.E.L.D. agents who returned empty-handed, Kraft continued to watch another group of Hydra that had left. The group drove the vehicle all the way to a port, then boarded a helicopter and flew in the direction of the Gulf of Mexico. When the plane landed on an unnamed island in the Bahamas, the group of Hydra began to scan itself with instruments. No matter how high the level of Kraft's tracker technology, it would not be able to get rid of the mode of transmitting and receiving signals, so in the end it was discovered by them. The Hydra people quickly destroyed Kraft's tracker, and then took out a piece of equipment like a tuning fork to launch an interference wave at the surroundings. Brother, the reconnaissance plane has also lost contact. Ah. I saw. Looking at the snowflakes on the screen, Kraft was also a little helpless. All of these underground workers were too cautious. Although he is also rushing to the Bahamas, he actually understands that there is a high probability that he is doing useless work. As for the reconnaissance opportunities will not be discovered, Kraft doesn't matter, not to mention that the stealth function on the reconnaissance aircraft is an independent system. Even if Hydra gets its own reconnaissance aircraft, it would be a delusion to copy the technology inside. Dreamland Technologies' anti-theft method is the best in the world. Even Kraft hopes that Hydra can take away his reconnaissance plane so that he can follow the vine and find them. Unfortunately, judging from their previous cautious attitude, the probability is really very small. When Kraft drove the Banshee fighter plane to the small island, it was already empty. All clues were wiped out, and there were even traces of explosions. The handling method was very rough. Tisk. I knew I would follow them myself. Kraft patted his thigh with some annoyance. He didn't follow him personally because he was more concerned about the situation in the Hell's Kitchen. He waited until he was sure that he and Martin had taken out the Maguire gang's laboratory, Hydra. Bian also got rid of his tracking. Brother, those Hydra groups still have explosives buried under the ground. After Angela scanned the entire island, she projected a perspective view on the screen, showing the presence of landmines on several necessary roads to the island and places convenient for stopping. In addition, the missing reconnaissance plane was also found. Although it was hung on the tree because of the loss of Angela's control, the invisible force field was still working. The group of Hydra probably discovered the movement when it hung on the tree. A bunch of traps were also laid around. It's really dirty. These guys. Fortunately, Kraft stayed in the sky after coming over, otherwise he would definitely be blown up. Now that the clue is broken, Kraft doesn't intend to continue wasting time here. After recovering the reconnaissance plane, he controlled the robot to trigger all the traps of Hydra. The main reason is that in case other innocent people will land on the island in the future, they will be miserable. Listening to the continuous explosions below, Kraft's head is full of black lines. Do you want to be so exaggerated? This island will be leveled out so fast. After solving the matter here, Kraft didn't plan to return to New York, but flew to the island next door and found a remote place to take the time skateboard out. When he came before, he discovered that the location after the time skateboarding time will not change. A crowded place like New York is not a suitable place to cross. Are you finally going to go back? I was bored before. After Time Clock restored its original file size, it began to complain to Kraft. Next time you put me in your pocket, remember to turn off my switch first, or give me a pair of longer hands. Time Clock turned around, pointed his back at Kraft, and fumbled for the switch on his back with both hands. It's a pity. Out of reach. I see. Send me back quickly. Kraft gradually became irritable, and the character of this Time Clock was exactly the same as in the dream, with a lot of nonsense. So good. Time Clock stands on tiptoe. First do the preparatory activities, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then began the stretching exercise. Kraft. Finally, when the pit cargo was finished, Kraft took the time skateboard back to the original timeline. Back. Thank you for taking this train. Before the time clock finished beeping, Kraft copied it up, then decisively turned off the switch behind it. After putting away the time clock, Kraft didn't rush back to New York, but ran to the island that was bombed by Hydra 8 years ago. What if they came back later? It's a pity that Kraft still rushed out this time. After 8 years, the destroyed vegetation on the island has grown back a lot, but the potholes have not been healed, and coupled with the wind and rain, the environment on the entire island is not so good. It's a crime. Kraft sighed insincerely, and then turned on the wormhole generator in his hand. Because of the distance, he successfully returned to his laboratory after failing more than 10 times in a row. From now on, pay me close attention to all the information about Hydra. Compared to 8 years ago, this information society is more convenient for Angela to gather intelligence, which is why Kraft doesn't want to spend too much time there. Besides, also list all the data about Time Gem collected before for me. I used Time Gem to toss for so long before, Kraft was not nothing. Although he failed to stimulate the power in it, he also collected a lot of data. After a period of analysis, he can make something similar to Dragon Ball Radar. Gem Radar. Ancient One once said that Time Gem is only one of the 6 infinite gems. Kraft did not ignore this sentence. The Ancient One is not easy to start with, but the other 5 are not necessarily. Regarding the Hydra matter, Kraft did not hide from Martin Lee, telling him all the clues he found, and by the way gave him the cigar he had brought in from the Viper gang. I won't mention Hydra or something for now. Martin Lee's face was complicated. What you just said was, the time machine. Yes. Kraft nodded calmly, looking like, what are you making a fuss about? Roar. Martin Lee exhaled a long breath and said slowly, well, I should have been used to it. Then, what are you going to do? Facing Martin Lee's question, Kraft raised his hand and scratched his hair, and said with some uncertainty, like Wakanda, expose them? So you did Wakanda's thing? Martin Lee pressed his forehead, his mouth twitched frantically. Huh? Didn't I tell you? Nonsense, definitely not. Martin Lee is very tired now, and God knows what earth-shattering things this kid and his family has done secretly. Well, you know now. Kraft shrugged indifferently, he really didn't think it was a big deal. Seeing Kraft's indifferent appearance, Martin Lee was also quite helpless, but Wakanda's affairs were really unimportant now, anyway, it had been so long anyway. If according to what you said, Hydra has already penetrated into that shield at the beginning of the establishment, then it is very likely that many high-level countries also have their own people. You also know that these people have the ability to refer to the deer as a horse. They have suffered a bit of loss, but more of it is to make them lurking again. Martin Lee considered things much more comprehensively than Kraft, the bear kid. So troublesome. In Kraft's thoughts, as long as he exposes the Hydra problem, with their reputation, it must be called and killed by the world. Then it is very simple to find the guy in charge of the human experiment. But after what Martin said, it is even harder to find after the exposure. Do you really want me to go back in time and spend time with the Viper gang? Because Time Skateboard can't perform too fine Time Shuttle, so if you really want to do this, Kraft can only wait for the rabbit before, but when it will wait, only God knows. No, Ancient One should know too. Kraft, who originally hated spoilers, wanted to find Ancient One spoilers again. Don't worry, we have found the target, haven't we? Martin Lee smiled and rubbed Kraft's head. Hydra is there anyway and won't run away. We have time to play with them slowly. Having said that, Martin Lee showed a cruel smile on his face, and his state instantly switched to film mode. Your ability still can't fully control it? Kraft reached out and poked Martin's clothes, and a trace of negative energy penetrated his body along his fingers, making his mood suddenly depressed. Martin, you can still stay awake under this kind of negative energy, it's amazing. This trace of negative energy came fast and went fast. Kraft quickly recovered after being excited, and then he looked at Martin Lee, who was the same as usual except for the color. I really like the state I am now. Mr. Film stretched out his hand, the weird negative energy of black and white tumbling between his fingers, changing into various shapes. But with a dark face, don't you find it ugly? Humph. Mr. Negative snorted and gave Kraft a fierce look. Normally, with his current temper, even if Kraft is his adopted son, he must be taught a good lesson. As for why he didn't do it, it's not that Mr. Negative's temper has improved, but that he knows he can't do anything with Kraft. So Mr. Negative suppressed the tyranny in his heart, and slowly withdrew from the negative energy state. Because he didn't act lightly or heavily when he was in the film state, Kraft would definitely resist, but it would be different if he changed to Martin Lee. The handshake caused Kraft's brain to collapse, and Martin Lee ruthlessly rubbed his hair into a chicken coop. In short, don't worry about dealing with Hydra. For such a large organization, it is not easy to uproot them. At the same time, Martin Lee also made a decision in his heart. He intends to continue to expand his influence, and he will have enough confidence when he officially starts to deal with Hydra in the future. Okay, I get it. Although Kraft prefers to slash Hydra out of the mess, what Martin Lee said is also reasonable. Before digging out all the hidden Hydra, it is not a good choice to act rashly. Just like the previous exposure of Wakanda, it wasn't that I would be retributed to myself in the end. Hydra couldn't be in a hurry. The first thing Kraft thought of was to solve Martin Lee's physical problems, but he got the relevant experimental data from the Viper Gang. Although according to Martin, his ability was awakening after he escaped, the reason for his awakening was the previous human experiment in the Magia Gang. Kraft also took a look at his experimental report, by the way. It was different from the method used on Martin Lee. In other words, basically all the subjects experimented in different directions, but most of them went. It's the mental stimulation aspect. If Kraft's dream can be regarded as a kind of super ability, then he should also be regarded as a successful case. Martin Lee's negative emotions and his dream technology seem to be related to the spiritual aspect. Only, I always feel that my dreams should not be so simple. Kraft closed the experimental report in his hand and muttered to himself. If it is a kind of super ability to be able to replicate what appears in the dream, what is the matter with those inexplicable worlds? It can be said that the cat and the mouse have seen it before the amnesia, but Kraft in other worlds has not found the corresponding works in the real world. It seems that it is necessary to find time to go back and see what I was like before my memory loss. In fact, Kraft had this idea before, but he was busy tracking Hydra at the time, so he put the matter on hold. But don't worry now, let's solve Martin's problem first. With complete experimental data for reference, and Angela to help analyze, Kraft quickly sorted out several sets of solutions, but it is not certain whether they are effective or not. Because in Kraft's experiments on humans with animals in computer simulations, none of the attempts to replicate Martin Lee's ability were successful, let alone test solutions. Using Martin Lee's existing physical data to conduct a simulation experiment, the success rate is not low, but there is still a slight difference between the simulation experiment and the actual situation, and this little difference is likely to cause damage to Martin. Or forget it. Anyway, even if you become a negative, you won't lose control like Hulk. Seeing the tragic end of Martin Lee, who failed in the computer simulation, Kraft flinched. He thought it would be better to wait until he dreamed of the perfect solution before considering the problem. No, I want to try this. Angela listed several solutions with a relatively high success rate on the computer screen, and Martin Lee was very interested in one of them. There are many solutions that have been sorted out, but the overall idea is actually two. One is to completely abandon the super ability and directly eliminate or separate the negatives, but Martin Lee has never considered the solution in this way, and Kraft does not think he will choose. After obtaining the super ability, few people want to abandon it. The second is to integrate Martin Lee and Mr. Film. There are also several specific directions. The primary and secondary personality model based on Martin Lee or Mr. Negative, which is an enhanced version of his current state, will not change much, that is, the stability is improved, and the switching between the two will be more comfortable. The fully integrate model no longer distinguishes between Martin and the negatives, and completely integrates the personalities of the two, but the result is not clear. Ability may be strengthened or weakened. These two integration methods and the abandoned separation method are relatively safe regardless of the result, but Martin Lee chose the most dangerous integration method: continue to strengthen the control of negative energy. According to the analysis of Martin Lee's experimental report, the human experiment was not completed. Mr. Negative said it was just a semi-finished product, because when the experiment was halfway through, Martin Lee had already taken the opportunity to escape. Therefore, in theory, if the experiment is carried on, Martin Lee should be able to fully control his own energy, and there will be no more split personality, and moreover, there will be a certain degree of improvement in strength. As an old father who could not beat his own bear child, Martin Lee took a fancy to this plan at a glance. It's not the main reason why you definitely can't win craft. The most important thing is that various Superman and Black technologies have appeared frequently recently, which makes Martin Lee also feel a strong sense of crisis. No. I don't agree. Kraft resolutely refused. Listen. Kraft. Martin Lee stepped forward and put his hands on Kraft's shoulders. I know you are very resistant to these things, but its success rate is very high, isn't it? I have something to you. Confidence. But I have no confidence in myself. Kraft never felt that he was a genius. His skills were all gifts of dreams. Even if he later had Tongdi's learning device, it would only increase his knowledge reserve. As you know, there are more and more people who master special abilities, and my abilities can't keep up, so it's necessary to enhance my abilities. Martin Lee continued to persuade. I can make you stronger equipment. Kraft still disagrees. I still insist. Martin Lee and Kraft looked at each other seriously. If you are worried that the experiment will go wrong, you can try to improve it. The equipment you make is not foolproof, isn't it? The two are actually inconsistent. There is not much difference. Kraft, you always have to take this step. Up to now, increasing his own ability is already a side effect. In Martin Lee's view, Kraft limited his abilities because of the shadow of his childhood, so Martin wanted to take this opportunity to force him to overcome his heart. Magic. But Kraft's angle of thinking about the problem is fundamentally different from his. He really does not like human experiments. In addition to the inhumanity of the process, it also lies in its danger and uncertainty. The experimental results he encountered in dreams basically turned into monsters or possessed great contingency. This kind of human body experiment Kraft definitely couldn't be interested. But now it has grown. Our Kraft, who knows better about weighing the pros and cons, has not completely rejected this kind of research. For experiments like super ability development that do no harm to the test subjects, even if they fail, there is no danger. Kraft will not resist much. At most, he is a little awkward. When he discovered that Martin Lee didn't want to conduct an experiment right away, Kraft was also relieved. He was also afraid that Martin would go his own way. Since he was given time to optimize slowly, he would wait until he dreamed of a solution, or if it was true. Let's talk about finding a perfect solution. However, Kraft's careful thought was easily seen by Martin Lee. He quickly added, don't think about dragging it on. Anyway, I also kept a copy of the experimental data. I'll take it. Find other people for these information. Martin Lee took out a USB flash drive and shook it in front of Kraft's eyes, and then quickly put it away. Wait. When were you tortured away, Angela? Kraft stretched out his hand to snatch it, but he was easily suppressed by Martin without wearing a battle armor. You didn't set a specific level of authority for Uncle Martin, so I set him to the highest level according to the degree of human intimacy. Angela explained to the side. Plus these materials were originally related to him, so I didn't notify you. Okay. I see. Kraft sighed helplessly. He didn't want to make things so exaggerated that he would put on his armor to grab the U-disc in Martin's hand, so he had to agree first. Come down, give me a year. No problem. Martin smiled and slapped Kraft on the shoulder twice, encouraging. Come on, Kraft. I believe you can. Humph. Kraft snorted badly. He was not sure if he could find a solution within a year, but who gave him a time machine? A big deal. When the 1-year period is approaching, he will take the time skateboard and continue to study and dream a few years ago, and will come back to solve Martin's problem when he finds a way, or directly tell himself in the past. If you think about it in this way, I haven't met my future self now, then it's very likely that I have solved this problem within a year. When Kraft began to face this problem squarely, he suddenly found a blind spot, which made him suddenly optimistic about the prospects of future research. And if it doesn't work, I can still ask Ancient One. Kraft found himself less and less resistant to spoilers. To find Ancient One, Kraft is definitely going to do it. Even if he didn't ask her about the future, Kraft was greedy for the portal spell that he could open at hand. It's just that it takes too much time to learn spells, and Kraft has too many things to do at the moment, so he has no choice but to postpone it. Both Hydra and Martin Lee were in a hurry. Kraft added 2 more hosts to Angela, which were responsible for tracking Hydra and perfecting Martin Lee's experiment. In addition, the Infinite Gems radar is constantly being debugged. The data collected before shows that the energy emitted by the time gem is very complicated. After some analysis, it was discovered that all its fluctuations are centered on a very weak gamma ray, but there are too many gamma ray responsive objects and even living things in this world. Such as the Hulk, such as the laboratories in various places. So how to screen them has become the biggest problem, but overall the progress is gratifying. Now there are fewer and fewer targets appearing on the Infinite Gems radar. While the Infinite Gems radar is still being debugged, Kraft intends to go back to the past to see if he can retrieve his past memories. As for preventing the Magias from kidnapping themselves, to be honest, he has not thought about it. Although the experience after being kidnapped was very miserable, he also gained magical dream power, and Kraft was quite satisfied with his current life. But if he had relatives before being kidnapped, what about friends? Although Kraft has never found a missing person notice related to him for so many years, it does not mean that he must be alone. His current name is different from the past, or he thinks it is because it's not necessarily that your relatives and friends were also kidnapped by the Magia gang. When he really had to face the memory of the past, Kraft also became concerned about gains and losses. Calm down. Kraft patted his cheek vigorously. This kind of thing will be changed at the time. Anyway, get your memory back first. No matter how entangled Kraft is, he still has to go, and if he is lucky, he can collect some information about Hydra. Kraft sorted out his mood and took out the time skateboard again. According to the experiment report obtained from the Viper gang, Kraft's real name should be Edward Wong. It was 9 years ago. To be on the safe side, Kraft decided to set the time of the crossing 10 years ago, and took a time skateboard to find a remote location, and Kraft began his second time travel. 10 years ago, it arrived 10 years ago. Skillfully turned off the time clock of the broken mouth, and Kraft looked around. He chose a corner of a long cemetery, plus it was night, so there were no people around at all. Ancient One Magician. Kraft yelled tentatively, and the space in front of him really began to shatter, and then a bald head emerged from it. It looks like you have seen me? Ancient One asked with a smile. Huh. Can't you see it? I should have told you, knowing the future in advance is not a pleasant experience, and there are too many future branches related to you, I can't read them all. This Ancient One also answered Kraft's question patiently. Well, about 2 years later, we met once, and you invited me to Kamar Taj for a cup of tea. When Kraft said this, he subconsciously licked his lips. A drink? Ancient One did not know where he took out a cup and handed it to Kraft. Thanks. Kraft wasn't polite to her either, and he was bored when he took it. Puff, puff, puff. This tea is wrong. The bitter taste is completely different from what Kraft had drunk before. Oh, isn't it? That's probably because of the tea that suits your taste, I haven't cultivated it yet. Ancient One still has a gentle smile, but Kraft was not deceived by her disguise. He is familiar with things like pranks. Okay, if it wasn't intentional, Ancient One would leave Peter Parker single for a lifetime. No kidding, this cup is. Ancient One handed over another cup of tea. Kraft looked at her warily, and did not pick it up. Don't worry, this cup is real. I was just a small revenge. You must know that you are in a certain future, but you have hammered me to death. Anyway, you were talking about it, how do I know if it's true or false? Kraft murmured and took the teacup, took a sip carefully, and found that the taste was correct this time, so he raised his neck and poured it into his mouth. As for Ancient One's statement, Kraft actually believed it a little. Otherwise, how to explain that she had such a high tolerance for herself? She must have been hanged by herself in the future. Kraft, who has the confidence of Dreamland technology, is so confident. Ancient One didn't mean to argue with him, but asked, should I go to Kamar Taj again? No. I have something to do now, and I will look for you later when I am free. Returning the teacup in his hand to Ancient One, Kraft shook his head and refused. Okay. Ancient One didn't force it, but just reminded. But I still have to say it again. Don't interfere with your past too much, it's not good for you. I see. This time Kraft didn't immediately agree, but was silent for a while before reluctantly nodding his head. Ancient One smiled, opened the portal and left here, and Kraft also shrank himself, sitting in the invisible Banshee fighter plane and flew in the direction of Hell's Kitchen. After arriving in the Hell's Kitchen, Kraft used a holographic mask to disguise himself as a young Asian. He is now about 1.7 meters tall, and disguising himself as an adult is not a violation of peace. In Hell's Kitchen, it is very easy to get an ID certificate. Kraft took out the gold that Shun came from the boss of the Viper gang, and easily obtained an ID certificate that could be used in most parts of New York. During the definitely period, I also encountered people who were jealous and wanted to do something to themselves. This kind of thing couldn't be more normal in Hell's Kitchen, but after Kraft broke their limbs with an easygoing look, everything went smoothly. Then let the stunned guys help find a house in Hell's Kitchen, where Kraft lived. Because the internet in this era is not yet developed, it is very difficult for him to find his past self, so he can only let Angela use a reconnaissance plane to keep an eye on all the movements of the Magia gang, and on the other hand he is in Hell's Kitchen. Inside, he inquired about Edward Wong. On the normal timeline, Peter Parker came to find Kraft again, but by this time Kraft had already ran back to 10 years ago, and now he was hosted by the Kraft robot controlled by Angela. Kraft, you must help me this time. As soon as Peter walked in, he grabbed the Kraft robot's arm and said eagerly. Harry's body cells have begun to show signs of collapse. The current lizard potion can only temporarily relieve his illness. I really can't help it. Compared with Norman Osborn, Harry Osborn was on set earlier, which made Peter Parker, who thought he had enough time to study the solution, had to run to Kraft again for help. And this time he had decided that no matter how much Kraft refused, he would hang on. Yes, but you have to make sure that Harry Osborn keeps it secret for me. After thinking for a while, Angela agreed directly. Before Kraft left, she not only restored her wireless intrusion permission, but also gave her great autonomy, so she could take the lead and agree to Peter's request. If you don't agree. Did you agree? Peter Parker looked dumbfounded. He was ready to fight a protracted battle. He didn't expect Kraft to agree to it all at once. Aren't you sick? Peter reached out his palm to the Kraft robot's forehead and asked cautiously. Angela slapped Peter's arm away, rolled her eyes and threatened like Kraft, if you don't like it, then forget it. I don't really want to help anyway. Don't, Peter hurriedly said with a smile. I was just a little surprised. Kraft, you really are a good boy with a kind heart. Humph. The Kraft robot crossed his chest with both hands and sneered at Peter's praise. If it weren't for Martin's problem, I wouldn't bother to care about it, Osborn. That Green Goblin dared to blow up my toy factory before. This is also the main reason why Angela agreed to Peter Parker. Although the content of the experiment is different, as far as the results are concerned, there is no difference between the problems faced by Osborn's Green Goblin and Martin, so if there is one more experimental subject's data, it is also very helpful to solve Martin's problem. By the way, Uncle Martin's situation is very similar to Uncle Norman's situation. Peter slapped his face in hindsight. The laboratory will be set up by Osborn. I will send you a list of the equipment that needs to be used. Remember, keep it confidential. Because of the addition of Harry Osborn, Kraft's miniature base must not be exposed. Fortunately, these experiments do not use Dreamland technology. It is not a big problem, and it can be easily handled with Osborn's resources. In addition, this is also a good opportunity for Angela to penetrate the internal network of the Osborn group. In case Harry Osborn wants to leak the secret, she can detect it in time and teach him an unforgettable lesson. And Angela has no other hobbies, except for finding artificial intelligence, which is to invade other people's databases. No problem. Peter didn't know that the database of the Osborn group was being targeted by an artificial intelligence. He patted the Kraft robot on the shoulder with excitement, packed the ticket and said, Harry is not a talkative, and I also help. I will watch him. After obtaining Kraft's consent, Peter Parker hurriedly left, quickly ran to find his friend Harry Osborn, and told him everything. So, you are Spider-Man? After listening to Peter's talk, the expression on Harry's face was very complicated. Even if my dad becomes the supervillain Green Goblin, Peter Parker is actually a superhero who has recently risen to fame, and his family has a genetic disease that can take his life at any time. And the bear boy of Kraft, besides being brilliant in mechanical technology, he is not inferior to the Osborn group in biotechnology. After receiving so much information at once, Harry Osborn really didn't know what expression to make. That doesn't matter, Harry. What matters now is your genetic disease. Peter took out the notes he found in Norman Osborn's office and gave them to Harry Osborn. This is Uncle Norman's note. It was because of running out of time that he forcibly injected the imperfect Green Goblin serum, so his temperament became Green Goblin. Harry took the notebook and looked at it. As the heir to the Osborn family, he knew a lot about biological sciences, so he could naturally understand the unpredictable formulas and symbols above. But his focus was not on this, but carefully looked at the test report written by Norman Osborn. Although what Norman wrote was just a very ordinary description of the changes before and after the serum injection, Harry could also deeply feel his father's efforts to solve the family's genetic disease and his love for himself. Father, tears slipped from the corner of Harry Osborn's eyes, and he slowly closed his notebook, then hugged Peter Parker. Thank you, Peter. If it weren't for you, my father's fate would have been worse now. I used to still hate Spider-Man, I'm sorry. We are friends, Harry. Peter patted Harry on the back, softly comforting. The main thing now is to solve your physical problems. Then, Peter Parker told Harry Osborn all the conditions that Kraft, Angela, had mentioned. In addition to the need for Osborn to set up the laboratory, Angela's solution is not to perfect the lizard potion or the green goblin potion, but to let Harry Osborn inject the same defective serum as his father, and then solve the personality change problem. If it is to directly improve the green goblin serum, it will not help at all to solve Martin Lee's problem. At first, Peter did not want to agree, but was used by Angela. This will also have a chance to save Norman Osborn. This reason was persuaded. Although definitely Peter was persuaded, he did not directly make the decision for Harry, but gave him the right to choose. If Harry didn't want to do this, Peter would understand. After all, most people don't want to become an uncontrollable lunatic. But Harry Osborn obviously had no such concerns. Even without Peter's reminder, he thought of the benefits of doing so. No problem. If it succeeds, I can figure out a way to release my father on bail. If it fails, please trouble you to hand me over to the police too, Spider-Man. Harry Osborn smiled and patted Peter on the shoulder. Damn. Why can't I find it? Kraft has also stayed in Hell's Kitchen for a little half a month, but he didn't find any information about Edward Wong. Instead, he had a lot of fights with the gangs here. And he actually gradually became famous and was crowned with the title of Iron Hand, because anyone who provokes him will basically have his limbs broken, and those with better luck will either have their hands or their feet broken. As a result, the gangsters actually started to woo him. There are also some Asians who have smuggled into America and struggled to survive in Hell's Kitchen. They came to want to mix with Kraft after hearing the news. But Kraft drove them all away. Martin Lee had this experience. As a result, he was cheated several times by those so-called own people. As Martin's adopted son, Kraft was also taken away as a hostage. Although Kraft's hostile attitude towards people of other skin colors was largely developed in the Hell's Kitchen, if there is any place where Kraft can treat people of all skin colors equally, then there is also only Hell. The kitchen is out. In this place, even blood relatives cannot trust each other, let alone the same skin color. So although he considered joining a certain gang, or pulling a group of people to build a power, and then letting them help find himself at this point in time, it would be too risky to do so, and Kraft finally gave up this idea. During this period of time, Kraft was only looking for it in private, without even giving a specific name. Someone who had received the news began to use imposters and other methods to touch porcelain on his side, and also they found a few similar-looking little boys. If it really spreads the news, maybe he has been taken away by other gangs without waiting for Magia's help. When Kraft was at a loss, Angela suddenly reminded, "Brother, many people captured by Magia's gang were tied up from other places, so are you not in Hell's Kitchen in the first place?" Kraft. Why didn't you say it earlier? I thought you knew. Angela Phantom, who was floating beside Kraft, replied aggrievedly. I was stupid." Kraft patted his forehead. He completely ignored the possibility that he was not a resident of Hell's Kitchen. He wandered in Hell's Kitchen like a fool for half a month. After finding the problem, the matter was resolved. Although there are not so many cameras for Angela to invade in this era, it is not too difficult to spend some time finding someone. I don't know if it is fortunate or unfortunate. Before his memory loss, Kraft did not have any relatives or friends, but grew up in an orphanage since he was a child. Dean Carlos Brown is a kind old man on the surface. In fact, he was also one of the gangsters in Hell's Kitchen. But later he repented because of some experience and left the Hell's Kitchen after he died. He started a family called himself the Orphanage of the Surname. And Kraft, or Edward Wong, was an ordinary member of that orphanage. As for the surname, he originally had the same surname as the Dean, Brown, but later he took the initiative to change it to Wong. Kraft was very curious about why he had to change his name to Edward Wong, which is really not a normal behavior for a child, so he secretly went to the Brown orphanage to observe it. Then Kraft discovered that his past self seemed to be hiding something. Because Edward Wong at this time doesn't feel like a 4 or 5-year-old child at all. He barely behaves a little childish when there are other people. Once there is no one left, he will become extremely silent. She hides in the dark without making a fuss and doesn't know what she is thinking. So before I lost my memory, was my character so weird? Kraft, who was hiding from the side, scratched his head frantically, feeling that he didn't seem to be very likable. It's so gloomy. At this time, I must have hidden some secrets. It's just that Kraft can't catch his past self for questioning. Although there are machines in the dream that can read the mind, it either has many restrictions or is very harmful to the human body, so it can't be used on himself. At this time, Kraft began to admire the ability on the mysterious side again. On the mysterious side, mind reading is not a rare ability, especially when the object of mind reading is the non-mysterious side. The other party is not aware of him at all. Was Red thinking. It really doesn't work. I can only go to Kamar Taj later to see if I can learn the ability of mind reading, and then come back to see what happened to me before my memory loss. As for how he was captured by Magia's gang, Kraft wasn't interested in knowing. Anyway, he didn't plan to stop it, so there was no need to sit on the sidelines and suffocate. So after Kraft left the orphanage, he rode a time skateboard back to the original time and space. After returning to the original time and space, Kraft was planning to go to the orphanage first. At any rate, he had taken care of him for several years, and he would take care of it if necessary. As a result, Angela spoke first, and her voice seemed a little hesitation. That. Brother. What's wrong? Angela rarely showed such a nervous mood, which made Kraft a little curious. I want to report something to you. This twisted look looked like a little girl who did something wrong, and she felt Angela's thinking model was getting closer and closer to a complete life. But Kraft didn't have time to be happy for Angela's performance at this time, but his heart suddenly burst. Before I left, I gave Angela a lot of freedom. Wouldn't it be so much more than 10 days? This girl created an omnic crisis for me, right? Thinking back to the tragic scene he saw in his dream, Kraft shivered subconsciously. Fortunately, Angela quickly explained to him that it was not an omnic crisis, but that Peter Parker had agreed to help solve the genetic disease of the Osborn family. Roar. It turned out to be just such a small thing. Kraft exhaled a long suffocation, which turned out to be just a false alarm. If you agree, just agree. You can control the situation. After listening to Angela's analysis, Kraft also felt that the problem was not big. Harry Osborn had also seen him. Generally speaking, he was a pretty good guy. With Peter's guarantee, Angela still left the back door. Belongs to the kind of person who can barely be trusted. Brother, don't you blame me. Well, logically speaking, I should blame you. Kraft scratched his head. If it weren't for his previous thinking about the omnic crisis, he would still have some opinions on Angela, but after comparing it with the omnic crisis, I feel that this little thing is not a big deal. But who made you my lovely sister, so I won't blame you. Kraft said beautiful things and fooled Angela. You should check for me first. What's the status of Brown Orphanage now? Good brother. Kraft's beautiful words still worked. Angela responded enthusiastically, and quickly collected the Brown Orphanage's information over the past few years and passed it on to Kraft for viewing. As the dean and founder, Carlos Brown at the moment has passed away long ago. Now he runs the orphanage and is a caregiver who used to work in the orphanage. Carlos gave the orphanage to him before he died. Came to take care of it, and this nurse did not live up to Carlos's expectations, and took care of the orphanage in an orderly manner. Anyway, doesn't the company need to do charity to reduce taxes? We will include this orphanage as a donation in the future. Since the situation in the orphanage is good, Kraft didn't want to intervene too much. An average donation every year is enough. After solving these little things, Kraft returned to the laboratory and recalled his stand-in robot. How is the situation with Infinite Gems radar? There seems to be something wrong. Angela released the results of several recent tests. After several screenings, the number of infinite gems that could be displayed on the radar was almost zero. Why say almost? That's because it can occasionally detect the time gem of Ancient One in the direction of Nepal. As for why it can only be displayed occasionally, Kraft also guessed the reason time gem is usually sealed in the eye of Agamotto. So it should not be a radar problem, but other gems, like time gem, were hidden by someone. Kraft murmured under his chin. Now I'm sitting on the wax. Sure enough, infinite gems is a good thing, and most people don't show it to people like Ancient One. No way, the other infinite gems seem to be missing for a while. Let's get things done with Martin and Peter first. For infinite gems, Kraft is more curious. After all, he has used time gem, and he didn't give him a response. The other gems are probably similarly cold-hearted, and it doesn't matter whether they take it or not. Contact Peter Parker. Osborn's laboratory at the moment has already been set up, but Harry Osborn has not yet been injected with Green Goblin serum. After all, it is an unfinished version. After further checking for safety, it can be used by Harry. When Kraft made the call, it happened that the time for Harry to inject Green Goblin was just determined. So Kraft called to Martin and hurried over together. Hello, Kraft, how are you, Mr. Martin? After arriving at Osborn's new laboratory, Harry Osborn took the initiative to call Roar. Kraft had also met Harry Osborn before, but he was not familiar with it. Now his face is pale, his forehead is slightly sweaty, and the smile on his face is also very reluctant, apparently worried about what will happen to him next. Don't worry, we have two Superman types, Spider-Man and Mr. Negative. Even if you become the second generation of Green Goblin, they can easily rub you on the ground. Kraft patted Harry on the arm, soothing. Harry Osborn's expression stiffened for a moment, and then he looked at his friend with a wry smile. Then I will leave it to you, Spider-Man. Then he turned his head to look at Martin Lee. Wait, I may have to trouble you, Mr. Martin. Well, Martin nodded unsmilingly, and then tapped Kraft on the head. Don't worry about this kid, he is born with a broken mouth. What's wrong? I'm telling the truth. Kraft clutched his head and felt angry. Under his gag, Harry Osborn's emotions became less tense. Then let's start, Peter. Harry nodded at Peter, then walked into the already prepared eco-cabin with a brave gesture. Peter stepped forward to tie Harry Osborn with a belt, not only to prevent him from struggling during the serum injection, but also to prevent his sudden change in personality after the injection and hurt people. What? With the injection of Green Goblin serum, Harry Osborn in the eco chamber screamed loudly, and he could see through the special glass. His muscles were gradually becoming firmer, and a large number of blood vessels burst into the skin. The bottom twisted violently, like worms. After a while, the screams gradually subsided, and Harry Osborn could not be seen in the ecological cabin at the moment, and it was filled with thick green mist. As the fog slowly dissipated, Harry Osborn's appearance was revealed. At the moment he was hanging his head, his muscular body was covered with sweat, and his brown hair was tightly attached to his scalp because of the sweat. Drop a few drops of water from time to time. Harry. Are you okay? Peter rushed forward quickly and opened the hatch to untie the strap on his body. Then Kraft kicked him away. Are you stupid? He doesn't know what the situation is now? I'm in a hurry. Peter Parker, who was kicked to the corner, looked at Kraft with a grievance, but can't you just be lighter? Knowing that Peter's physique is far superior to normal people, Kraft naturally used the function of the foot-strengthening shoes when kicking him, and Peter also knows about Kraft's equipment. But having said that, is your equipment so powerful? Peter rubbed his ribs and got up from the ground, hissing cold breath in his mouth. It's not uncommon for Kraft to be able to make that kind of transforming belt. It's not uncommon to make this kind of equipment. It's just that Peter feels that for daily use, there is no need to exaggerate the equipment. Kraft ignored Peter's muttering, but turned his gaze to Harry Osborn, who was still tied up. At the moment he was already awake and was staring at Peter Parker with a cold gaze. Oh huh. It seems that your good friend resents you deeply, Peter. As Kraft spoke, he took out a syringe, stuck it on Harry's body and began to draw his blood. The strap used to fix Harry Osborn uses Peter's cobweb technology and some of the material technology in Dreamland technology, so Kraft doesn't worry about him being able to break free. And Harry Osborn also knew that he couldn't break free, so he didn't struggle from start to finish, just staring at Peter Parker. You actually sent my father to the police station. He values you so much. You will also hand over the Connors experiment to you. Affected by Green Goblin's potion, Harry Osborn is now completely possessed by the lever, and can find a reason to blame Peter Parker anyway. It's so noisy. Just be quiet. Kraft, who was collecting data originally on Harry Os, raised his wrist, gave him an anesthesia needle, and then glanced at Peter, who was stunned there. What are you stupid standing there for? Come and help collect data. With the full cooperation of Kraft and Peter Parker, the experiment went smoothly. In the middle, Harry Osborn pretended to be cured several times and wanted to regain his freedom, but he was exposed by senior patient Martin Lee. Later, Kraft was annoyed by him, so he let Harry out and asked Martin Lee and Peter Parker to jointly beat him up. After that, the little Green Goblin classmate was much more well-behaved. With the active cooperation of Harry Osborn, the progress of the experiment was further accelerated, and Kraft and Peter quickly found a solution to the Green Goblin drug problem. Although this method only solves the evil personality problem, it is not the same as Martin Lee's request to enhance his own ability while solving the personality problem, but it also indirectly increases Martin's safety. And after Harry Osborn returned to normal, there was one more researcher, so Martin Lee's plan to continue the experiment was quickly perfected. After Angela's private simulation experiment, the success rate was 100%. More than 90. Although Kraft was still a bit worried, the success rate was really good. Coupled with Martin's strong request, the experiment finally started and it went smoothly. How are you feeling? When Martin Lee walked down from the experimental platform, Kraft asked immediately. Although the data on the instrument showed that he had no problems, Kraft still wanted to hear Martin personally confirm it. Roar. Has never been better. Martin Lee smiled and raised his right hand. A cloud of jet black energy lingered between his fingers, and a white light appeared in this group of black aura. This strange phenomenon of both black and white is Mr. Negative. Unique characteristics of negative energy. Great, you finally won't become an African when you use ability. Clough nodded his head, and was also very satisfied with Martin's current situation. Your ability has also increased. It has been strengthened a bit, but not too much, mainly because the control of negative energy has become better. I couldn't do this before. Martin Lee spread out his palm, and there was a lifelike negative energy bird floating on it. It feels useless. It's better to just choose another solution with higher security. Kraft curled his lips, still complaining about what Martin had forced him to do before. It's not just control. Martin gathered a group of negative energy between his fingers and pointed it at Kraft. After thinking about it, he was a little unable to get it off, and he made this kid irritated. God knows what he will do. So Martin turned his gaze to Peter and Harry next to him. Peter is also an old acquaintance, and it doesn't seem very good to use him as a demonstration. Harry Osborn is different. He owes Kraft a favor. Even if he is angry, he has to hold it back to me. Quickly calculating the consequences in his mind, Martin Lee pointed his finger at Harry Osborn decisively. Harry Osborn. The black and white negative energy hit a dumbfounded Harry, and his handsome face quickly twisted. Harry grabbed Peter's neck with his backhand and yelled at him, "Go to hell, Spider-Man. I'm going to report my father." "Ah, sorry Peter. My emotions just got out of control suddenly, shouldn't it? Is it because the side effects of Green Goblin have not been resolved?" Harry suddenly let go of his hand, and he asked suspiciously, who didn't know the specific abilities of Martin Lee. Cough cough cough. "No, you just got Uncle Martin's negative energy." Peter, who has had a similar experience, didn't blame his friend, but turned his grievances to Martin Lee. Martin blushed and put his fist to his mouth and pretended to cough twice. "Isn't this the same as your previous ability? The most is that you had to contact people before, but now it's remote. And the effect doesn't seem to be as good as before." Kraft's doubts broke Martin's embarrassment. He quickly avoided Peter's sight and explained, "Because I just chose to amplify his anger, he can recover so quickly, which shows that he has treated Peter. There is not much hatred, Peter, you have a good friend." Nodding to Peter, Martin raised his finger again and pointed it at Harry Osborn. "But my current negative energy erosion is more than just the ability of anger." Harry. Another group of negative energy penetrated into Harry, who had given up resistance, and Peter Parker also hid aside early. But this time Harry Osborn didn't violently hurt anyone, but collapsed to the ground with a look of despair. "Ah. I want to die. I'm just a trash. Born to be human, I'm sorry. I'm desperate for this world. If there is an afterlife, I want to be a potato." Harry Osborn lay on his side on the ground, his eyes blankly looking into the distance, and his mouth kept muttering. What a terrible ability. Kraft was also frightened, and subconsciously distanced himself from Martin Lee. Martin Lee shrugged and said triumphantly, "That's it. I can now let others enter into a variety of negative emotions. In fact, the previous negative energy erosion has this effect, but I can't control the specifics. Tendency. Now that I have improved control, I can make it focus solely on a certain negative emotion." 7 deadly sins. After listening to Martin's explanation, Kraft thought of this for the first time. "There are not as many as 7. Martin Lee said with a smile. "From a certain perspective, emotions such as greed, arrogance, and appetite can actually be regarded as positive emotions. How are these things classified? I'm actually not sure." Martin shrugged. He is not a researcher, he is not interested in principles or anything, he knows how to use it anyway. "The only things I can control at the moment are anger, sadness, fear, and despair." So he is desperate in this state. Kraft pointed to Harry Osborn, who was still lying on the ground, always feeling that his state was desperate, which seemed a bit wrong. Definitely is desperate. You can also say that it is negative. The definition of these two emotions is actually quite vague. It was also the first time Martin used his new ability to other people, and now he can only explain it according to his own feelings. Kraft rested his chin, and suddenly thought of something. If Mr. Rick's cucumber conversion technique is effective against Martin's trick, wouldn't it be invincible? Kraft took out the cucumber potion left over from the previous test and poured it down on Harry Osborn, who was lying down. "Hey. Kraft. What did you feed Harry?" Peter Parker watched with horror as his friend turned green all over his body, with a faint smell of pickled cucumber. "Well, this is a potion that can turn people who want to escape reality into pickled cucumbers." While answering Peter's question, Kraft touched Harry's skin. It did feel like a vegetable and fruit touch, but it still maintained the strength of the original skin, and the texture and color of the cucumber also changed over time. Is slowly recovering. "It looks like a failure. Harry Osborn. I don't even have the qualifications to be a pickled cucumber. I'm still dead." Harry Osborn awoke from the desperate negative emotions and sat up abruptly. "What just happened?" Sorrow and change, Harry." Peter Parker stepped forward and patted his friend on the shoulder. He, who knew Kraft's urination as a bearchild, had already guessed what Harry would encounter next. As expected by Peter, Kraft reached out and pressed his watch twice, projecting the previous video of Harry Osborn's salted fish state onto the wall. "If you dare to divulge my secrets, I will post these videos on major portals." Harry Osborn turned dark, turned his head to look at Peter Parker, and said in a deep voice, "Peter, The things you told me before are true. I've laughed at you before, I'm so sorry. Peter. I use you to apologize. Yes. Yes. I told you already, Kraft is a very helpful guy. Peter Parker quickly took Harry's words, then looked at Kraft warily. Guess I believe it or not. Kraft grinned and sneered, showing his row of white teeth to Peter. Peter. Danger. Harry, you killed me. Peter suddenly felt that the future was dark. Wait, my future seems to be completely dark after meeting Kraft. Oh, that's all right. After a lot of jokes, the relationship between the few people has also become a lot closer. At least Kraft thinks so. Then they discussed how to fish out Norman Osborn. Kraft also told Harry that Norman is now in the hands of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is impossible to fish him out by conventional means. So what should I do now? Peter still knows Kraft very well. Normally, this bear kid must be too lazy to deal with this kind of problem. Since he took the initiative to bring it up, it must have a purpose and a corresponding method. It's very simple. Kraft broke the news directly. The boss of S.H.I.E.L.D. is now planning to form a team composed entirely of special groups. As long as you are like Peter, you can become a superhero and go everywhere. I believe they will find it soon. Come here. If you want to investigate Hydra, it is a good choice to directly enter the already infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., but Kraft does not intend to contact them personally. Peter and Harry are his best springboards for investigating Hydra. Put a spy in S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra can do it, can't I do it? And you can also choose to disclose your identity like Tony Stark. Let them know that the Osborn Group has solved the problem of the Green Goblin serum, but in this case, it is estimated that many official forces will come to harass you. If they are not afraid of death, let's come, Harry shrugged. The Green Goblin medicine was originally a research done by my father to solve the genetic disease of our family. It is fundamentally different from Captain America's super soldier medicine. If other people inject it, on the contrary, it will be life-threatening. Oh? If that's the case, it would be even better. Kraft is not clear on this point. His main concern is how to solve the problem of personality changes, and he has not much interest in the original information of Green Goblin Pharmacy. Wait, Kraft, why are you so active in making Harry a superhero? Peter couldn't help interrupting the conversation between the two. He once invited Kraft to fight criminals with him, but was ridiculed. He didn't think this kid could change his mind in such a short time. Because of your belt. Kraft did not intend to keep Peter from the Hydra, because he still needed Peter to cooperate with him to search Hydra after joining S.H.I.E.L.D., but he did not have that trust in Harry Osborn, so he used Angela for him long ago. Think of a good excuse. The most likely guess about your belt in S.H.I.E.L.D. was from the Osborn Group, but Green Goblin did not use similar equipment before. In order to prevent them from suspecting me, a superhero belonging to the Osborn Group is also required to use similar equipment. Equipment. Is that right? Peter thinks about it and thinks it makes sense, that is, the transformation of Spider-Man is no longer his own exclusive feature, and he feels a little weird. On the other hand, Harry Osborn was also not satisfied. Do I want to use a belt to transform like Peter? Harry's expression was a little resisting. It's quite embarrassing. What's so embarrassing about this? Don't you think this is super cool? Harry. Classmate Peter became unhappy and started arguing with his friend. The problem is that I want to make my identity public, not the same as a guy like you who hides my identity. Peter Parker thought for a while, if his identity is exposed, it is indeed a bit embarrassing. Then don't make it public, Kraft said indifferently. Anyway, just let S.H.I.E.L.D. know your identity, and the equipment should be changed to a different style from Green Goblin. Anyway, you can use this belt. Alright. Thinking that he had a bunch of handles in Kraft's hands, and all the things Peter had accused him of, Harry Osborn could only nod and agree. Well, Kraft nodded in satisfaction, so when you become famous, there will be new products in my toy factory. Seeing Peter and Harry pulling their faces down at the same time, Kraft added calmly, don't worry, it will pay you dividends. The face of the former poor ghost Peter looked much better in an instant. Although he has solved the economic problem by optimizing the lizard potion, the thrifty habit he developed before is not so easy to change. But the young master of the Osborn family looked even more ugly. Is he Harry Osborn the one who lacks that little money? Oh, it's not a big deal. Kraft felt that he had to comfort the toolman. In addition to you, I have also obtained the authorization from Iron Man, and I can still be on the same stage with him in the toy industry. Competitive, doesn't it make me feel better just thinking about it? Real? Harry Osborn, who is also a rich second generation, is a fan of Tony Stark like Peter. This is also related to his age. If he and Stark are about the same age, the relationship between these two people with similar positioning would be very different. Oops. Definitely true, you will soon see Iron Man toys produced by Dreamland. Kraft did not deceive people. Although Tony Stark also has his own toy company that produces Iron Man products, he has an obsession with Kraft's mechanical pets. In the end, he traded for Kraft with the authorization of Iron Man products. Develop a set of Iron Man series mechanical pets for him. With the predecessor of Tony Stark, Harry Osborn was finally less resistant to Dreamland Toys selling belts to make money. As for the use of a belt to transform yourself, you can hide your identity anyway, right? And the sound and light effect when transforming is really handsome. As a good friend of Peter Parker, Harry Osborn is also an old man. Ha 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 ha. Peter Parker was tied tightly to Kraft's workbench and let out an earth-shattering laugh. In this situation, Kraft was naturally injecting him with a nanolocator so that he could summon the belt at any time. As for Harry Osborn, Kraft didn't want him to know too much for the time being. Cough cough cough. Kraft. Are you really trying to retaliate against me? Peter's physique is much better than Quinn, and he doesn't need to hit so many locators, so the state is much better than that of a dog. If I want to retaliate against you, there are more ways to go. Kraft rolled his eyes and untied Peter's belt. Big brother is not fair. Why do I have to get so many shots? Goozy Quinn was very unhappy. He had heard that someone was going to suffer the same sin as himself, so he rushed to watch it very actively. He didn't expect it to be over at once. It was much more relaxed than him, and the dog was suddenly in his heart. It's not balanced. Because my technology at the time was not as good as it is now, Kraft said casually. I always feel like you are fooling me, big brother. Quinn stared at Kraft with a serious face. Although he knew that Quinn could talk before, Peter still couldn't adapt for a while, looking at the dog who was arguing with Kraft in a daze. Even Quinn said that he had suffered this crime and ignored it. Okay. How about compensation if I ask Alice to cook you something delicious tonight? I want to eat fragrant chicken. Quinn was happy in an instant. No problem. Once again using food to get rid of the annoying dog, Kraft gave Peter a tweet. Why are you still stunned? Try the new belt to make it work. Oh. Peter walked off the workbench, then reached out and patted his hip, then whispered, Henshin. At first Peter was curious as to why he wanted to use Japanese as a starter. Kraft explained plausibly. You don't usually speak Japanese, so you won't accidentally trigger the belt. You can definitely change it, just, good brother Kraft. How about it? It's not the first time you said it anyway. Then Peter Parker has no objections. Following Peter's voice trigger, the silver-white belt appeared directly on Peter Parker's waist, and then quickly tightened. Are you ready? The belt directly saved the steps of coin insertion, and immediately began to dress Peter. After a flamboyant sound and light, the black spider battlesuit, which was not much different from the previous one, was worn on Peter's body. It's just that compared to the previous relatively slim shape, the new spider battlesuit is thicker on the shoulders, back and calves. This is Kraft's new function for Peter's upgrade shoulder cobwebs launcher, back-type machinery spider legs, and calf jet flight device. In addition, there is definitely no shortage of artificial intelligence that assists in combat. Hello, Spider-Man, I am your auxiliary Kazuna I. After the armor was dressed, a synthesized electronic female voice heard in Peter's ear, and then introduced him to some functions that Kraft had added to the armor. Wow, this is amazing. Thank you Kraft. Peter said happily while testing the new function on the battlesuit. But why does this I's voice sound familiar? That definitely, Kraft shrugged, I used Mary's voice as the sound source of Kazuna. Yes, is it? Hearing Mary's name, Peter's reaction was very different from before, and his mood suddenly fell. What is your reaction? Kraft asked strangely. The armor was lifted from Peter Parker's body and changed back to a normal black belt, revealing his bitter face. I broke up with Mary. Because of Dr. Connors and Norman Osborn's matter before, Peter Parker left Mary Jane in the cold for a long time, and in order to conceal his identity, he never gave a decent reason, with Mary Jane coming and going. The character naturally broke up with Peter without hesitation. Kraft definitely didn't know what caused the two people to break up. He didn't care about it at first, so he just glanced at Peter who was like a chicken, and then, oh. No, don't you comfort me. Kraft's flat reaction made Peter Parker very unhappy. What can I comfort you? I haven't been in a relationship. Kraft curled his lips, thinking Peter Parker was a bit inexplicable. You broke up and you broke up. Didn't you have a girlfriend before this? How can it be the same? Peter Parker was in a hurry and wanted to have a break with Kraft. But Kraft didn't bother to pay attention to him. Okay. I'm looking for you and there are other things. Kraft pulled out his ears, made clear that he was not interested in this topic, and interrupted directly. What's the matter? Peter also realized afterwards that talking to the bear boy about his relationship with Mary was playing the piano with the cow, and he suddenly lost the interest in continuing to talk about it. Kraft told Peter about the current problems of Hydra and S.H.I.E.L.D. and asked him to investigate the events of the year for himself after joining the so-called Avengers. At the same time, he also reminded him not to be fooled by S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra. Peter screamed. As a pure America teenager, Peter's childhood is absolutely indispensable in the comics of Captain America, so he is naturally familiar with the name Hydra. We should tell the police this information immediately. The passionate young man Peter Parker said excitedly. I'm not going to give you evidence. Kraft rolled his eyes, then used Martin's content to educate himself to educate Peter Parker. And do you know who in the official organization is trustworthy? What if Hydra finds that something is wrong and they hide again? That's right. What you said makes sense. After being educated by Kraft, Peter Parker also calmed down. I will meet the machine then. Peter Parker said with some excitement. Compared with the usual small troubles, it is more superhero feeling to dig out a famous criminal organization from the dark and solve it. Oh, by the way, this is Harry Osborn's belt, you can bring it to him. Kraft handed Peter a silver-white belt. Except for the color and leather buckle, the overall shape was basically the same as Peter's belt in normal shape. The leather buckle of this belt is the same silver-white round metal, but there is also a layer of fluorescent green ring on the outermost circle. Definitely the coin slot and coins for starting the belt will naturally be no less. This is a locust. Peter glanced at the pattern on the coin and asked curiously, why is it a locust? Kraft shrugged and said nonchalantly, aren't you a spider? I just thought of giving Harry the whole bug-themed look, plus the green look of his old man's armor before, so let me think of locusts. As he said, Kraft pointed to the locust coin in Peter Parker's hand. In addition, the coins of the two of you can be exchanged, there is a surprise. Real? Hearing that Kraft was sold out, Peter, who was curious, slipped the locust coin in his hand into his belt. Are you ready? As the coin was put in, Peter's belt once again became that conspicuous shape, but the spider relief in the middle of the belt became a black locust with blood-red eyes. At the same time, a huge amounts of red and black mechanical locust figure appeared beside Peter, wrapping him up. Spider. No. Hellrising Hopper. Along with the heated electronic sound from the belt, a set of red and black battle armor appeared on Peter's body. Compared with the previous spider battlesuit, this hell-high leaping locust battlesuit is more angular and in style. There is a clear difference between the upper and the spider battlesuit. Only a white spider web pattern on the chest retains a little bit of the original spider element. Peter looked at the hell locust battlesuit in the mirror, and suddenly didn't want to give the coin to Harry. Because the shape of this suit is more in line with his appetite. Hateful. Really want. Peter turned his head to look at Kraft, and said flatly, let's discuss something, Kraft. What's up? Kraft looked inexplicable. That's. Can you change my original battlesuit to its current shape? Go ahead and do your dreams. The dark-faced Kraft pushed Peter and drove him out. It would be nice to have a battle armor for you, and there are so many shit requests. Don't Kraft, I have something to discuss. The begging Peter Parker didn't dare to resist Kraft's push hard, and was pushed out slowly while still trying to discuss with Kraft. Or give me another locust coin. Labor and capital are not available. You have time to think about these and some, so why don't you think about how to get Mary back? Pushing Peter out of the door, Kraft slammed the door shut. Unable to persuade Kraft to get himself a new battlesuit, he stabbed him again, and Peter Parker sullenly walked towards the Osborn building. Harry, here, this is your transformation belt, oh, and coins. Peter Parker came to the Osborn building and gave him the belt that Kraft had made for Harry. Are you in a bad mood? Peter. Harry Osborn reached out his hand to take the belt and put his hand around Peter's shoulder and asked. It's not Mary's business. Peter Parker sighed and replied. Harry also knew about Peter and Mary Jane, especially the breakdown of their relationship was due in large part because Peter was busy solving Osborn's genetic disease, and Dr. Connors' affairs were also related to Osborn, inseparable from the relationship. So Harry was very concerned about this, and helped to explain to Mary Jane, but in addition to these things, Peter had a lot of little secrets that had to be concealed because of the Spider-Man, so Harry's explanation alone was basically to no avail. Harry Osborn could only be anxious for Peter. If it doesn't work, you can tell Mary your true identity, Harry suggested. Let's talk. Peter still can't make up his mind. In contrast, he doesn't want his relatives and friends to worry about him. Let's take a look at the battlesuit Kraft made for you. Alright. Seeing that he didn't want to continue talking, Harry Osborn couldn't say anything more, picked up the silver-white belt and buckled it on his body. In fact, he was also quite curious about what his battlesuit would look like. The initial dressing is complete, the user, Harry Osborn, confirmed that it is correct. The blue light swept across, and there was a slightly different electronic sound from Peter's belt. Harry Osborn, who had known the procedure for a long time, picked up the coin in his hand and looked through it. Locust? It looks like we are going to form an insect team. I must remind you that spiders are not insects. Peter couldn't help correcting. I definitely know it, just to say it in passing. Harry rolled his eyes, then stuffed the coin into the coin slot of his belt. Authorize. Progrise. The lines are different from Peter's, but the electronic sounds are just as exciting, and Harry's belt has also become a similar shape to Peter's transformation, but the leather buckle in the middle is still a silver disc with a green edge, and the relief above it is a yellow-green locust. Immediately behind Harry, two phantoms of mechanical mantis, one large and one small, appeared, and a bunch of cool-looking patterns lit up around him. The rider kick increases the power by adding to brightness, shining hopper. The virtual shadows of the mechanical mantis dispersed and turned into armor parts attached to Harry's body. Then the virtual shadows turned from virtual to real. A set of battlesuits, also mainly black, supplemented by fluorescent green patterns and masks, appeared in front of Peter. The eye lens of the battlesuit is bright red, and it can be vaguely seen that there are a large number of grids in the lens, which simulates the compound eye structure of insects. When a shine, darkness fades. As the last electronic sound fell, Harry put on his armor and posed in front of the mirror very excitedly. This armor is so handsome. It's no wonder that Kraft will be hailed by the media as a genius toy designer. With this design, I don't know where it is higher than my father's Green Goblin armor. Excited, Harry actually started to dissatisfy his old father. Peter Parker on the side looked sour in his heart. Harry's battle armor, whether it is the shape or the special effects of the transformation, is much more eye-catching than his spider battlesuit. This kid Kraft is not authentic. Hello, Shining Locust, I am your assistant Nanako. Oh, there is actually an auxiliary eye. Harry got even more excited. The voice of this eye sounds a bit older, but it would be nice if it were younger. But the problem is not big. Harry Osborn wore a locust battlesuit enthusiastically for a long time before turning his head and asking Peter, "How do I take off this battlesuit?" Peter was stunned for a moment, then slowly cocked the corners of his mouth. Finally, someone had the same experience as me. Harry, you deserve to be my good friend. Gleefully told Harry how to unlock, then watched him press the locust head on his belt and shouted, "Brother Kraft," and then the password was entered incorrectly. An electronic tone sounded on the belt. The user identified as Harry Osborn himself. Friendly reminder. The correct password: I see want to wear women's clothing. Peter Parker. Harry Osborn. New Yorkers were surprised to find that their good neighbor Spider-Man recently had a new teammate, a superhero called the Shining Locust. Also represented by insects, they also have peculiar belts and dazzling transformation effects. It would be weird if there is nothing tricky between the two. In the eyes of those who are well informed, the true identity of this Shining Locust is self-evident at all. Among them, Nick Fury, who is running around to form Avengers, is the happiest, because Harry Osborn's old man happens to be in his hands. It is so easy to fool this Locust Man into Avengers. Definitely, Director Fury thinks it remains to be seen whether Harry Osborn will become as evil as his dad, but at least he is a good candidate. In addition, I helped Tony Stark solve the palladium poisoning problem before, and Iron Man is basically confirmed. Even if Nick Fury is the king of the agent, I feel a little excited. After all, this is a plan that Nick Fury has been thinking about for decades, and it is not until today that he finally saw a hint of possibility. Compared with Director S.H.I.E.L.D., who is in a good mood, our Mr. Iron Man is not so happy. Since the last time he saw the Spider-Man's transformation method, he felt that he was weak in the suit of the armor, even the portable suitcase battlesuit, compared with the Spider-Man belt. Not 1.5. It's just that he's been busy analyzing the weaknesses of vibranium recently, and on the other hand, he has to spend a few days studying nanotechnology. The most important thing is that he doesn't want to follow the Spider-Man belt, so he has to consider other tricks. The handsome way, this will postpone the production of the new battlesuit for a period of time. Unexpectedly, after such a delay, another superhero came out to steal the limelight with him, and it was better than Spider-Man in terms of styling and sound and light effects. Jarvis, is the band I want contacted? Tony Stark asked in a bad mood. Already contacted, sir, they will arrive in 13 minutes. Along with the answer of Jarvis, a phantom of a middle-aged man dressed as a housekeeper appeared beside Tony Stark. The name of Jarvis comes from Howard Stark's butler, and his avatar is naturally based on the prototype of Jarvis. It's just that Tony Stark didn't want to be completely addicted to the past, nor did he want Jarvis to become a substitute for that Jarvis, so he made a little adjustment in appearance. Very good. Tony Stark nodded, dropped the tools in his hand and walked into the living room. In order to be able to distinguish from Spider-Man and the newly appearing Locust Man, Tony Stark specially asked someone to write for him a song with the theme of Iron Man, and carefully selected a band to accompany him. It just happened today. The day the song was recorded. Iron Man's songs definitely should be sung by Iron Man himself. When Iron Man appeared in front of the world with his exclusive BGM, Kraft's Dreamland Toys Company also launched the Iron Man series of mechanical pets, as well as Spider-Man and Shining Locust belts and holsters. This is another national carnival. However, the joys and sorrows of human beings are not interlinked, and Nick Fury only thinks they are noisy. Seeing that his Avengers was about to take shape, why suddenly one or two of them went off track? Thinking of the Avengers being dispatched in the future, accompanied by various sound and light special effects and rock music, Nick Fury felt his forehead throb. In fact, these guys are not a bit ostentatious, but in this case, it seems a bit troublesome to persuade Captain America, who has just awakened from a sleep for 70 years, to join in. However, compared with other difficulties, these are just the minutiae. Despite the headache, Nick Fury is still pushing forward his Avengers plan in an orderly manner. At the same time, in a secret underground laboratory of S.H.I.E.L.D., Professor Eric Shavig has also made considerable progress in his research on Tesseract. Will my Iron Man series lose to that ridiculous belt? This is impossible. As long as Tony Stark doesn't come and talk about it, Kraft will still have a few words with him. Tony Stark is curious about the sales of the 3 superheroes, and Kraft will tell him the truth. Then Tony Stark was very unconvinced. Isn't this normal? The belt is much cheaper than the mechanical pet. Kraft replied in a speechless voice. He had changed Tony Stark a bit, but now it seems that he still has that shit virtue. Really? I never pay attention to the price of goods, but I understand it when you say that. After all, not everyone is as rich as me. Yes, Mr. Tony Stark is a famous rich man. Kraft casually perfunctory, treating Stark, who would die if he didn't show off, just ignored him. Speaking of which, are you really not joining? Stark started lobbying Kraft again, and Nick Fury's Avengers plan looked good, so he planned to form one by himself. And Kraft was the first member he wanted to get into the group. Whether he became a superhero was second, mainly because he didn't want Kraft to go astray. We can also form a small team. Don't let the 2 bugs stand out. Don't you want to see how surprised Peter looks when he knows your superhero's identity? After knowing the identities of Spider-Man and Shining Locust, Tony Stark can naturally speculate that Kraft is also an insider, and may even provide technical support to them. In order to lead Kraft onto the right path, Tony Stark also took great pains. I don't want to. I'm tired of playing pranks of this level for a long time. Kraft also declined Tony Stark's invitation again. Once the persuasion failed, Tony Stark did not continue to fight. He knew that for children of this age, transitional persuasion would make them rebellious. Although Kraft, the bear child, was a little bit naughty, a little cold, and a little bit extreme, he was quite restrained overall. You know that Tony Stark was a lot more arrogant when he was his age, and the people who offended him are countless. Isn't he an Iron Man now? So Tony Stark took the initiative to switch the topic and chatted with Kraft about the more popular space program of the Life Foundation. The Life Foundation is a biotechnology company in San Francisco. The company's owner is Carlton Drake. He was originally a great expert in genetics and has a small reputation in America. Only before that, the Osborne Group was America's leading company in life technology, so the Life Foundation was only well known in San Francisco. Other places are not so transparent, and the sense of existence is not much higher. Until the identity of Norman Osborn Green Goblin was exposed, the Life Foundation took the opportunity to take the opportunity. Although it has not been able to shake the leading position of the Osborne Group, it is not a dragon-like role, plus Carlton Drake does have it. With 2 brushes, the scale of the Life Foundation has expanded a lot in a short period of time. And they also started to involve other industries. The space program mentioned by Stark is one of them. The main purpose of the space program led by the Life Foundation is to explore extraterrestrial life to seek more possibilities. In addition, there are other forces joining in with different goals, such as collecting various samples in space and obtaining different experiments, data, observation of cosmic storms, etc. And Stark Industries also invested in it. Tony Stark didn't have any special goals. He just thought this kind of outer space exploration was very interesting. If he didn't want to maintain peace on the Earth, he actually wanted to join the exploration team. For fun. But he couldn't go. Tony Stark still made a casual investment, and the request was that the data obtained by the Life Foundation should also be sent to him at that time. Carlton Drake naturally agreed to this kind of free money. When Tony Stark mentioned this matter, his words were full of self-satisfaction, and there was no conscience of being a fool. Probably in Tony Stark's opinion, it is a very cost-effective thing to get a large amount of experimental data from outer space for a small amount of money. It's a pity that Stark chose the wrong person to show off. Kraft didn't have much interest in the experimental data from outer space. He really wanted to go to space, he had more methods. Not to mention those relatively serious space technologies. One Chibe is a ruthless man who can travel in the universe with 2 wings on a car. If you want to go to space, it's really not a difficult task for Kraft, but he has no interest in it for the time being. And after fixing Martin Lee's physical problems, Kraft originally planned to leave for Nepal to find Ancient One to learn the 2 convenient magics of circle, portal and mirror space, but unfortunately, the school is about to take the final exam. Although Kraft usually goes to school or not, Martin Lee doesn't care, and he also knows that Kraft has made himself a stand-in robot, but for the exam he still requires Kraft to take the test in person. As long as the test results no problem, other details can be ignored. In addition, Kraft himself intends to take a break. Recently, he has returned to the past, and he was afraid to solve Martin's physical problems. The spirit collapsed a little too tightly. It is necessary to return to campus life and relax. Otherwise, Kraft didn't have so much time to chat with Tony Stark online. Brother is going to school with me today? That's great. Seeing Kraft picking up his school bag rare in the morning, Alice said happily. If you can make a body for Angela, it would be better for 3 of them to go to school together. I don't want it. I have already mastered all the knowledge in school. Going to school is simply unnecessary. Angela's phantom floated by the dining table, her arms placed in X-shaped objection. I can go. I wanted to go to school a long time ago. Quinn jumped onto an empty stool, put his front paws on the edge of the table, looked at Alice expectantly, his tail flicking frantically. This is. Alice grinned, her expression very embarrassed. Don't say anything stupid. Kraft knocked Quinn on the head. I told you that you can't bring pets in school. If you are really idle, let Martin take you to the devil's help. Don't be funny, I'm expanding my power recently. It's too dangerous to take Quinn. Martin Lee on the side decisively refused. He definitely knew that Quinn also had a suit of armor, but he was crowded with people and couldn't hide any secrets at all, and there are robots and talking cats and dogs in the house. The daily routine has long since collapsed. At least he is a bit normal during his working hours. But there is one thing to say, the current fighting between the gangs is actually quite abnormal. Let's not talk about the nosy superhero. There are more and more guys with special abilities in the gang. If his abilities hadn't been upgraded recently, he might have to use the battle armor that Kraft prepared for him. Ends. Surprised. So am I so unwelcome. Seeing that the dog was about to make a fuss again, Kraft casually stuffed his half-eaten sausage into his mouth, smoothly interrupting his brewing emotions. Give it some more. Goozy immediately left the school affairs behind him. Stupid dog meow. Beja flicked her tail and despised as she always did. After coming to school for a long time, Alice is still so popular, Michael is still so broken, and Fatty Liao is still an LSP. Think about your previous magnificent experiences. Well, it doesn't seem to be particularly magnificent. Kraft's pretended emotion only faded. This kind of plain campus life is actually quite good. Thinking of this, Kraft turned his head and discussed the latest game with the classmates. Compared with these guys who usually have to come to school, Kraft, who lives in the studio every day, has more leisure time to play games, so his progress among the crowd must be the fastest, and then there will be a bunch of people pestered Kraft to ask about the game strategy. Hello, Kraft, I'm a reporter from Global Daily, can I interview you? On the way home from school, a reporter suddenly shot out of the stab and stopped in front of Kraft. The reporter took out his press card and showed him it, begging quickly. Please give me an interview. This is really important to me. Kraft glanced at the reporter in front of him, and noticed that his dark circles were heavy and his beard seemed to have been left out for a while, and he looked very desolate. The Global Daily is a big newspaper, so there are such miserable reporters? Glancing at the press card in his hand. Eddie Bullock. I don't know, I haven't heard of it. As for whether the press card is true or not, Kraft basically hasn't been interviewed a few times, so naturally he can't recognize it. So Kraft immediately suspected the identity of the person in front of him, and he was not Tony Stark, and he had no interest in interviews. Even Tony Stark, the reporter, had to be a beautiful woman. So he indifferently refused the request of the man in front of him. Not interested, don't get in the way. As Kraft returned to campus life and was waiting for the exams, the Life Foundation space program was also proceeding in an orderly manner. On the day the rocket was launched, several TV stations broadcasted it live. A lot of money. Kraft watched the interviews with the participants by the TV station before the launch, and recognized several well-known figures in scientific research. For example, Reed Richards. This is a genius who does not lose to Tony Stark, but he is not as high profile as Tony Stark, so there is not much media coverage. However, like most geniuses, Reed Richards also has his shortcomings. This person doesn't know anything about property management, and he likes to delve into some weird things, and often causes accidents because of this, so his research funding has always been a big problem. Then every time Reed Richards started to lack money in his research, he would run out and fool others to invest in him, but this guy was like a dwarf reincarnation, and the experiment would always go wrong for various reasons. Although Dr. Richards was able to solve the problem in the end, because of the extra losses caused by the experiment, most of the costs were far beyond expectations, and few companies invested in him were successful. There were more people being scammed, and Reed Richards gradually couldn't get investment. At this time, he thought about selling some of his own inventions. As a result, because of his previous stigma, not many people bought them, and it will keep prices low. I don't know what price Reed Richards paid to get Carlton Drake to agree to take him. It is commendable courage that the Life Foundation dared to play with Dr. Richards. Kraft sighed. Reed Richards is the kind of scam who can do something for you if nothing happens, so he is very dissatisfied with the Life Foundation's space program this time. In addition to Reed Richards' this scam, there are several other participants Kraft who have also heard about it, but compared to Reed Richards, their reputation and ability are even worse. 2 grades. After watching the whole process of the rocket launch, Kraft returned the remote control to Alice. She immediately cut the channel to the soap opera that she had been following, and watched it with relish. How is Martin's side? Are you still fighting for territory with Kim? Kraft looked at Angela's phantom. Angela, who was busy bullying Jarvis on the internet, did not answer Kraft's question immediately, but floated in midair for a while before replying. Yes, brother, and the League of Defenders of Hell's Kitchen also has it. Intervened, but was easily defeated by Uncle Martin. Huh. The League of Defenders? Kraft's brain filled with question marks. How could those guys suddenly intervene? Wouldn't it be good to wait and watch Martin and King fight each other? Damn it. When did the negatives become so strong? The gold like a mountain of meat clenched his casserole with huge amounts of fists, and slammed it on his own table. The table made entirely of marble was cracked by him. Recently, the Devil Gang didn't know what medicine it had taken. It changed from its former indisputable state and began to invade the Hell's Kitchen on a large scale. There is a faint tendency to unify the Hell's Kitchen. With Jin Bin's current strength, in fact, he wants to teach the League of Defenders a profound lesson, and even to eliminate most of its members. It is not difficult in theory, but in this way, his previously integrated strength is it will definitely fall apart. But now, because of the existence of the League of Defenders, even if a small number of people are unwilling to convince them, under the influence of the general trend, they can't make the waves. For this reason, Jin did not secretly thank the League of Defenders for their assists. Originally in Jin Bin's plan, as long as he continued to dangle the League of Defenders against himself, then Hell's Kitchen would one day be truly united by the group of nosy superhero, and he Jin was the leader, naturally. Will become the underground emperor of the city of New York. However, just when Jin Bin's plan became a reality step by step according to his vision, the Demon Gang, a gang that basically did not move before, was dominated by Chinese forces suddenly jumped out, going crazy and spreading out to the underground forces in Hell's Kitchen. Attacked. And the boss of the Devil Gang's filmmaker didn't know what was going on. Ability also improved a lot. Jinhee sent several men with special abilities to block the film. As a result, none of them fell. Can come back. I didn't think about that guy in the movie, so he can tolerate it. Kim didn't know that Martin Lee's expansion was to prepare for Hydra, and he thought he had long ago wanted to annex all underground forces in New York. He was just letting himself put his guard down before. Unfortunately, the superhero in the League of Defenders also thinks so. Unexpectedly, the Devil Gang's previous struggle with the Magia Gang was just acting. They should have had the intention of annexing Hell's Kitchen for a long time. Matt Murdock reproached himself very annoyed that he and Spider-Man had prevented Luke Cage and police officer Misty who wanted to intervene in the Demon Gang and Magia Gang's grievances. It's not you, Matt. Luke Cage patted Daredevil on the shoulder and comforted. We also agreed with your judgment at the time. We can only say that the film is hidden too deep. Yes, it's just postponing them until now. Jessica Jones touched her fists and did not put the negatives in her eyes. It doesn't matter what the negatives are or the golden combination, it won't be enough to defeat all of them. No, you don't understand the ability of negatives. Matt looked serious. I have played against negatives. His negative energy ability can erode people's spirits and make people fall into madness. If it weren't for I with Lika's help, I was already dead on the negatives. Luke Cage, who has also played against negatives, also nodded repeatedly. Yes, Jessica, you don't want to know that feeling, the kind of crazy thought that makes you want to destroy everything in front of you. Speaking of this, Luke Cage's eyes showed a trace of fear. Although he barely survived because of his indestructible mutated body at the time, the bad feeling that he was out of his control felt that he really didn't want to do it again. Then, doesn't he have any weaknesses? Matt and Luke's statement made Jessica's face a little pale, and she, who was once manipulated by the Purple Man, has always been very afraid of this power that can play with the mind. When I played against him, the negative energy erosion of the negatives must be in close contact, but from the news we received recently, he seems to have mastered the long-range method of negative energy erosion. This is probably his dare to tear the disguise and attack the reason for the Hell's Kitchen. Matt said in a deep voice. He also did not want to be corroded by negative energy again, but as far as the current situation is concerned, if the demon gang's expansion is not prevented, the negatives will become a more difficult existence than gold. If you are determined, you can still maintain a certain sense of sanity under the erosion of negative energy, but it's very difficult. Luke Cage added. Then leave him to me, the Iron Fist Daniel Rand, who is not very concerned about his own company, but is keen on fighting crime, volunteered. My practice in Kunlun involves the cultivation of the state of mind, and the negative energy of the negatives. I should be able to resist it. Although in Kunlun, Daniel had always been confused about the cultivation of the state of mind. Up to now, he only knows a little about it, but he has been in contact with him, and his willpower is still very confident. If you can really handle the negative energy of the negatives, then things will be much easier. Luke Cage patted Iron Fist on the shoulder. Those negative energies can slowly recover as long as the source is cut off. With so many members of our Defenders League, even if the negatives now master remote means, it will be difficult to erode us all at once. For the sake of safety, do I need to mobilize a part of the police force to help share it? Although Officer Misty joined the League of Defenders, she did not forget her identity as a police officer. With a double body, she became the link between the League of Defenders and the New York Police. Prior to this, there were very few superheroes in Hell's Kitchen that could cooperate with the police. Because of the existence of the Punished, the police did not have a very good sense of these superheroes, and basically treated them as criminals. Especially Luke Cage, who is both black and looks like a gang member. It was okay when he was in Harlem. The police in other areas knocked him down as soon as they saw him. Ground, and then knelt directly on his neck. Thanks to Luke Cage being in the lawful camp, coupled with his copper skin and iron bones, nothing happened. This is not necessary. Matt shook his head and refused. Facing super ability humans is still too dangerous for ordinary police, and people who are not determined enough will be eroded by negative energy, and they will expand regardless of the enemy attacking. That's right. Luke Cage patted his sturdy chest and joked, even if you need a meat shield, there is a special professional here. By the way, shall we inform Frank and Spider-Man? At this time, Iron Fist suddenly asked, with Frank's combat ability and Spider-Man's dexterity, it must be able to play a big role. Frank's words. Impossible. Luke Cage has a better understanding of the idea that the Punisher can do his best to eliminate evil, so he and Frank will talk a little more and understand it better. Now he wants to find Jin and take revenge with all his heart, hoping that the devil will help consume Jin and his forces. It is impossible to find trouble with the negatives, but the little Spider-Man can contact him. Maybe he can get his new teammates also pulled in. Then I will contact him. The New York police have Spider-Man's contact information. Misty, as one of the police officers responsible for the Hell's Kitchen, naturally also has Spider-Man's phone number. What? Deal with the demon gang. Peter Parker got a white sweat instantly after receiving a call from Officer Misty. UTM are embarrassing me, fat tiger. Peter Parker wanted to hang up the phone immediately without saying a word, but considering that this would only make Officer Misty suspicious, he could only use his little brain madly and found an excuse to reject the invitation of the League of Defenders. I'm sorry, Officer Misty, I don't have time recently. I'm busy investigating clues to a criminal organization, so I may not be able to help you. Peter feels that he is not lying, he is indeed investigating Hydra. Is that so? Do you need help from the police? Misty didn't have any doubts, but eagerly wanted to help. No, I'm just investigating secretly now, it's not suitable for fanfare. Peter quickly refused, ashamed secretly. But it is absolutely impossible for him to fight with Uncle Martin. Even without the threat of Kraft's bear boy, Peter Parker shuddered as long as he thought of Harry's salty state at the time. I hope Matt and the others can bear it. Peter silently crossed his chest, praying for Daredevil and the others. Oh, by the way, I had to remind Uncle Martin to tell him not to kill Matt and them. Although Martin Lee no longer has the so-called evil personality, Peter still feels safer to call and inform. As for saying that this will allow Uncle Martin to prepare in advance, it's not that Peter Parker underestimated the League of Defenders. Martin Lee, after the surge in ability, is not afraid of the League of Defenders, not to mention that he still has the negatives made by Kraft. The battlesuit is the trump card. League of Defenders. Seeing Daredevil and the others who surrounded him, Martin Lee cocked his mouth slightly under the mask. It's not okay to be gold, even you superheroes are actually under the command of you. The little Spider-Man had long been informing him, and he definitely knew that it was not the case, but this did not prevent Martin from taunting. Who is Jin Bin's subordinate? After we solve you and your demon gang, we will naturally send Jin and go to the prison to meet you. Jessica, who was flying in the sky, was the most irritated, and loudly refuted Martin's framing. So should I be happy? You actually put me ahead of the Golden Union? Yes. So you will be grateful and grab it. He. If you want to catch me, it's up to you to see if you have that ability. While speaking, Martin threw the negative energy that had been tumbling in his hands towards Jessica in the air. Jessica, be careful. Luke Cage reminded loudly that Jessica Jones also made a timely dodge action, but after Martin's ability was upgraded, even if the negative energy was detached from his body, it could be treated to a certain extent. Manipulation. I saw that black aura, glowing white, turned abruptly when brushing past Jessica, and instantly disappeared into her arm. Don't Jessica Jones, who was hit by the negative energy, let out a sharp cry, hugged her head and fell straight from the sky. Damn it. Luke Cage caught Jessica, who had fallen from the sky in time, and his heart sank slightly. Originally, Jessica, who had flight ability, was one of the best containment personnel in their team. I didn't expect to lose combat ability at the beginning, and looking at her performance, it was obviously not the same as when she was recruited before. With the support of Kraft's intelligence, Martin Lee knows all of these superpowers in Hell's Kitchen well, so when dealing with Jessica, he launched a cloud of negative energy with fear, directly let Jessica fell into the terrible memories of being controlled by the Purple Man. Look at it. Negative film. The Iron Fist, who was confident in his mental state cultivation, rushed towards Martin Lee, and at the same time shouted to Daredevil and the others, "I'll untangle him. You guys, hurry up." Martin sneered, avoiding the pair of fists with special powers, and patted his shoulder lightly, taking advantage of the force of grief. Then Iron Fist knelt to the ground without any suspense, and started crying loudly. "No. Father. Mother. No. Don't leave me alone." Iron Fist, hit the street. Iron Fist. Officer Misty Knight, who had an affinity with Iron Fist, raised his pistol and squeezed the trigger continuously at Martin Lee. As an outstanding graduate of the New York City Police Academy and an outstanding police officer who has fought against gangs in the Hell's Kitchen for a long time, Misty's marksmanship is definitely not bad, and it can even be said that her marksmanship is the same in the entire New York police community, is one of the best. It's just that her marksmanship is useless at the moment. With the power of an ordinary police pistol, even the negative energy shield that Martin Lee usually puts on the surface of the body cannot penetrate. When the bullet was about to touch Martin's body, it hovered around his body like it was stuck in a mud, and then lost all its strength and fell to the ground with a crackle. Just as Martin turned his attention to Misty Knight, Luke Cage leapt out of the other direction and rushed towards Martin. Raising his hand to create a black shield to block Luke's fist, then the negative energy shield dissipated automatically and turned into a black aura and penetrated into Luke Cage's body. And Martin's other hand was not idle, and he made a shooting gesture to Misty Knightby, who was changing the magazine, and shot negative energy at her in the form of a projectile. According to Kraft's intelligence, although Luke Cage and Misty Knight had some tragic experiences, the scars on their hearts were not as deep as Iron Fist and Jessica Jones, so he chose the desperate mood that Kraft called the salted fish energy. After acquiring the new ability, Martin Lee will naturally conduct a series of tests on it. Coupled with a series of actual battles during the attack on Hell's Kitchen, he has now basically figured out the effects of various negative emotions. Unless it is the target who has had some special experience, which caused him to have a very big emotional flaw in a certain aspect, or use salted fish. Desperate energy is the most effective and lasts the longest. Hey. The gang has been banned repeatedly, the boss only knows to make money, what am I still fighting for here? Officer Misty threw the gun in his hand aside, fell to the ground, and looked at the clouds in the sky, like a salted fish. I don't deserve to be a policeman at all. No, I don't deserve to be a man at all. I worked hard to fight crime, but I didn't even have a bonus. Sometimes I was wanted by the police. Superhero or something. I don't want to do it. Luke Cage also stopped, and slowly fell to his knees facing the wall, and then buried his entire face on the wall and started thinking about it. It is also in the League of Defenders. Apart from being able to block bullets, I have no use at all. Just taking a riot shield can take the place of my role. I have no meaning to exist at all, so let's die. Aren't you going to make a move, Daredevil? Martin Lee turned his head to look at the only Daredevil standing still, black smoke lingering in his fingers. You are Mr. Martin. For Matt Murdock, confirming a person's identity is not based on appearance, so Martin's mask did not have any effect. The function of the body and the sound will produce some different changes. Now Martin Lee has solved his own problems. Although he can still enter the film state to increase his strength, he does not need to enter the film state at present, so he will be heard by Matt. It's just that after he solved the physical problem, he was still slightly different from before, so Matt was a little uncertain. Martin Lee naturally knew the true identity of Daredevil. He recalled Matt's information for a while, and he wanted to understand the cause and effect, but he did not expect the phrase, hearing far beyond ordinary people, in the information Kraft gave him. It would be such an exaggeration. Hey, how good is your hearing? Martin sighed, put away the negative energy in his hand, and nodded at Daredevil. It's been a while, Matt. Mr. Martin, it's really you. Although he had heard the identity of the negatives before, when he really confessed it, Matt still felt very surprised and even ignored the fact that Martin already knew his identity. After all, in the cognition of Matt Murdock, Martin Lee and Kim are not the same as the fake philanthropist, they are really good people doing charity. Yeah, I am the negative. Martin shrugged and didn't want to explain too much to Matt. For the sake of your face today, I will let you go for the time being, but don't stop me from hindering me, next time I won't keep my hands. Abandoning the warning to the League of Defenders, Martin turned around and left with the demon gang who had been playing soy sauce nearby. Matt wanted to catch up and ask Martin Lee about what happened, but looked around. Jessica Jones. Don't come over. Daniel Rand. Ooh, cack. Misty Knight. Luke Cage. I want to die. ORZ. I'll stay. Jessica and Daniel are okay, but Matt feels that if they don't watch Luke and Misty a little bit, maybe they will hang out in the next second. When did the negative's ability become so terrifying? No wonder Kim is not an opponent at all. When Matt Murdock saw the evolved negatives for the first time, he had a deep understanding of his horror, and he could not help it. Damn. Next time I see the movie, I will get his intestines out. In the base of the League of Defenders, Luke Cage, who has recovered, is in an incompetent rage. For him, who pretends to be a tough guy, and indeed a tough guy, the experience just now is simply a blemish in his life. Misty, who had also become a salted fish, held her explosive head and buried her face in her arms. The Iron Fist, who was full of confidence before, was red and swollen with his eyes shrunk in the corner and didn't want to talk. In addition to not having eased from the sadness, it was also partly because of embarrassment. So, do you have a solution to the negative energy erosion of the negatives? Putting on a blanket and holding a cup of hot tea in her hand, Jessica glanced at Luke, who was still speaking harshly into the air. Although the weather is still warm now, Jessica, who recalled the terrible experience in the past, felt cold in her heart. Only by doing this can she feel better. As for the film, who loves to go? Who goes? Anyway, she didn't plan to face that kind of terrible guy anymore. Luke Cage was choked, but couldn't refute Jessica, so he sat down bitterly and took a sip of the beer in front of him. In fact, we still have a chance. Misty Knight finally recovered from the ostrich state, and then began to analyze the previous battle. Before, our attacks were too scattered. Although the ability of the negatives has changed a little and is more difficult to resist, we still have an advantage in numbers as we said at the beginning. If we swarm together, we still have a chance to defeat him. When fighting against the negatives before, because of Iron Fist's arrogance and Jessica's recklessness, they gave it to the speed of light as soon as they went up, and because of the lack of intelligence, they would be broken by the negatives one by one. If some people are used as bait and take the initiative to carry the negative ability, Misty thinks they still have a chance of winning. As for using the true identity of the film to catch him, Officer Misty didn't report any hope at all. Didn't the police know Kim Nam's identity? Didn't the police know anything about him? Martin Lee's assets and status on the bright side are much better than Wilson Fisk, and the League of Defenders will not take that effort. Then who will be the bait? Let's talk about it first. I'm definitely not going to do it. Jessica felt that Misty made a lot of sense, and then refused the task. And Luke Cage, who has always regarded himself as a flesh shield, had his eyes erratic at the moment, and he did not dare to look at Misty. To be honest, Misty did not want to experience the state of being autistic and wanting to commit suicide again, but this plan was proposed by herself, and her combat ability is indeed the weakest group in the League of Defenders. So she still mustered the courage to take the initiative to occupy the next spot. Count me, too. Daniel Rand, who had been silent in the corner, also stood up. Although I underestimated the ability of the negatives before, after the previous tutorial, my mood has indeed improved, and now I use the power of the Iron Fist more smoothly. Daniel clenched his fists and placed them in front of his chest and touched each other. The bright yellow light produced by the power of the Iron Fist flashed away. If you're a meat shield, I'm naturally indispensable. Seeing his teammates all volunteered, Luke Cage gritted his teeth and stood up. 3 people are enough to attract the negatives, but in this case, Jessica and Matt may not be able to get the negatives quickly. Misty nodded and continued to analyze. So we need more helpers. Matt, can you call your teacher back? Matt's teacher, Gunsao, is the leader of Shohehui's mortal enemy, Sacred Society. After the League of Defenders defeated Shohehui and expelled them from the Hell's Kitchen, Gunsao took the members of the Sacred Society to Japan to remove the roots. Originally Matt planned to go with him, but he had to deal with the gold merger at the time, so he put it on hold. I didn't expect that gold had not been resolved now, and something more ruthless appeared. Impossible. The obsession of the teacher in this life is to eliminate the hand union, other things are secondary. Matt smiled bitterly and shook his head. Before, because he wanted to stay to deal with Jin Bin, the old man had a fight with him, and he wanted his master to come back to help. He was definitely dreaming. Tisk. It's a pity that Spider-Man has other things to do. Misty murmured, then she hugged her shoulders and continued to think about what help she could find. The only person who knew the identity of the Spider-Man, Matt Murdock, heard Misty's mutter and couldn't help but shook his head and chuckled. He knows that the friendship between the Parker family and Martin Lee's family has always been very good. Even the little guy covered with thorns in Kraft was soothed by May Parker. Matt also admired it very much. Now think about it, if Spider-Man knew the true identity of the negatives beforehand, then he didn't come to help before. Maybe he just didn't want to be an enemy of Martin Lee. Wait, wouldn't that kid already know Martin Lee's current ability? Matt's face changed slightly, and he turned his head to deny the guess in his heart. No, Peter Parker still has a strong sense of justice. How could he not even remind us because of fear? Matt is still more confident in Peter's ethics, but he still doesn't know enough about the relationship between Peter and Kraft. At the moment, Peter, who was flickering between the buildings, was suddenly excited, and the cobweb in his hand almost let go. A somersault turned to the roof of a building, and Peter touched his chest. I always feel that my heart was a little bit painful just now. Maybe I have a heart attack, am I? Ever since he gained the power of the spider, Peter Parker hasn't even caught a cold, and now he has a sudden uncomfortable reaction, making him a little flustered. Well, when today's patrol is over, go to Harry to check it out. After making this decision, Peter kicked his legs hard and threw his body into the air again. In the end, everyone in the League of Defenders contacted Frank Custer, the Punisher, and Colleen Wen, a Chinese-Japanese mixed blood who had friendship with Iron Fist and Misty. I was overwhelmed by the mere negative emotions. I said you superhero are too weak. After learning what happened, Frank couldn't help but sarcastically said. Unlike the League of Defenders, who chooses to send criminals to the police station as much as possible, Frank, who has a bloody vengeance with Jin, has only one way to deal with all gangs, and that is to kill. It is also because of the different ideas that after working with Frank for a short time, most people in the League of Defenders had disputes with him. That is to say, Luke Cage, who has been on the streets since childhood, and Matt Murdock, who has seen too much darkness in Hell's Kitchen, can understand him a little bit, but they still think Frank is too murderous. If I do, it won't guarantee the life of Mr. Negative. Frank reminded in advance that he would never keep his hands on gang members, no matter whether the Devil Gang really has a bottom line like Matt Murdock said. Anyway, these guys are extremely sinful in his eyes. Kill. Yes, but you have to act according to our plan, you can't make your own claim. The horse nodded. He also knew that he could not convince Frank, but he also knew that the negatives had the habit of adding a negative energy shield to himself. Ordinary bullets would not hurt him at all. No matter how fierce the firepower of Frank was, he would not be able to kill him for a while. The negatives, on the contrary, can better contain him. Humph. Frank smiled disdainfully. He was very indifferent to Misty's crude battle plan, but he didn't offer to help, but just agreed. Because Frank himself knew that if he were to make the plan, he would only launch the layout with the goal of killing the negatives, and most members of the League of Defenders of this plan could not agree with him, so he simply said nothing. Do your own containment work, just find the opportunity to kill the negatives by the way. As for the negative emotions that the League of Defenders feared, Frank even sneered. Since his family died at the hands of gang members, his heart has died. Sadness, regret, anger, self-blame, despair. These negative emotions have always existed in Frank's mind, which is also the source of his motivation to retaliate against the gang. So, negative emotions? Frank Custer is fearless. The members of the Devil Gang are fighting with Jin Bin's men. The residents of Hell's Kitchen skillfully closed the doors and windows, took up weapons and hid in their houses, waiting for the fighting outside to end. I don't know that this is the first few gang fires today. Since the Demon Gang invaded the Hell's Kitchen, these gun battles seem to have not stopped. Even the old residents of the Hell's Kitchen think this situation is a bit exaggerated. Martin Lee is too lazy to worry about this. Kim Ho has not fully integrated the forces in the Hell's Kitchen. If he is integrated, it will be very difficult to smash the Hell's Kitchen. That's why he chose this radical way. In fact, The best time is when Shohehui has just been kicked out of the Hell's Kitchen, and Kim and has just started to integrate super criminals, but Kraft has not found the news of Hydra at that time. At that time Martin had no idea of expanding his influence. Boom. A huge amounts of sniper rifle hit Martin Li's temple. Although Martin Li was not harmed under the protection of the negative energy shield, the powerful impact still made him crooked involuntarily. Head. It's you again. Bullseye. Under the flare mask, Martin frowned. During the trial and error, Jin Bin also found the flaw of Mr. Negative ability. Although his negative energy can be launched remotely, his flexibility is still a little bit worse. Jin Yi's number 1 Bullseye is a good player who is proficient in mid and long-range combat. This Lester killer is a born marksman. He can make any object in his hand throw at the target with incredible accuracy, even the magical record of killing a target 100 yards away with a toothpick. Such a long-range combat master could not be used to contain the negatives. In the last match, although the Bullseye failed to solve Mr. Negatives, it also managed to contain him, making the Demon Gang's attack useless for the first time. And back. HMPH. Go on, and the Bullseye will be handed over to me. Although during this period of time, the film also captured several gang members with special abilities, he can't be trusted to these guys, so although the Devil Gang is so fierce at present, the real top combat power is still only Martin Li. And if Martin doesn't chase the Bullseye, he must choose to retreat, otherwise he will have to watch his men get named by the Bullseye. Go. Martin made more than a dozen negative energy long guns and projected them to the distant Bullseye. The Bullseye was the first time he put away the sniper rifle in his hand, turned over and jumped off the roof, and got into the floor below. In the room. This said again. In the last match, the Bullseye found that the use of buildings to block the field of vision had the best containment effect on the negatives, and Martin was indeed a headache for such a combat method. His negative energy weapons were relatively lethal at the physical level, but the destructive power is not very high. Martin could not easily find the site of the Bullseye in a pile of obstacles, but he was able to use his ability to throw hidden weapons at Martin from various theoretically impossible angles. Some of the special flying darts were able to penetrate Martin. Layer of negative energy shield. But it's impossible for Martin Li to retreat just in this way. He saw a faint black mist on the surface of his body, his skin and clothes quickly turned into black and white, and then he slammed into the wall. Go into the building where the Bullseye is hiding. This is also the first time Martin has turned on the film mode in front of others after the ability upgrade. Martin Li, who entered the film mode, is the complete body of Mr. Film, without battlesuit version. Damn it, he hadn't used all his strength before. The iron fist hiding from the sidelines smashed the wall fiercely, which was a mockery for him who was full of confidence at first but was killed by a spike. Actually, this is a good thing. Matt was silent for a while and suddenly said, this shows that Mr. Martin's current personality can communicate normally. You still want to talk to him? Luke Cage rolled his eyes. I know you have friendship, but you can't be so arrogant, Matt. Regarding the situation of Martin Li, everyone in the League of Defenders has also analyzed it. It is not a rare example that the character has changed a lot because of the special ability, so it is not difficult to draw similar conclusions. In the early film Mr. Matt and Luke have been in contact. It is a very cold and cruel guy. If the film Mr. is the leader, it is absolutely impossible to let them go because of Matt's face. Matt also asked if he should talk to Martin Li directly, but he was opposed by most people. Martin's situation was just their speculation. If the speculation fails, Matt will never go. What to do when I return? I'd better take down Mr. Negative Film first and then slowly talk about safer things. HMPH. If you want me to say it, I will blow up the whole building while he and the Bullseye are in that house now. It's 100. Frank sneered at the naive idea of the League of Defenders. I finally know why you said that you want to catch the Punisher. Hearing Frank's grumpy handling again, Colleen Wynn couldn't help but elbow her friend Misty's arm, lowering her voice and vomiting to her. Don't run away. They are coming out soon. Misty didn't take Colleen's words, but reminded her. Inside the building, the Bullseye is being chased by Martin Li in negative mode. After entering the film mode, Martin not only greatly improved the various attributes of his body, but also increased his power and speed when he cast negative energy. He directly caught the Bullseye by surprise. Fortunately, the Bullseye is not a vegetarian. Although he was a little rushed, he still supported it. However, as the various obstructions in the building were completely destroyed by the negatives, his condition gradually became dangerous. It can't go on like this. There is care in the Bullseye. Finding the right opportunity to escape to the new floor, the Bullseye threw 3 special flying darts towards the chasing film. The flying darts pierced the 3 vital points of the film at different angles and speeds. These 3 flying darts are definitely not worth mentioning for the negatives, but the Bullseye did not intend to use this hand to solve the negatives. He would choose to fight the negatives in this building because he prepared them here. Backhand. The bullseye used his arms to protect his head, and then jumped out from the next window with all his might. Following him, an explosion sounded from behind him, and flames and shockwaves spewed out from the window behind him. He was still in midair and flew out. Wow. The target eye that was blown out vomited a mouthful of blood, and then staggered up from the ground, felt his physical condition. There should be a few fractures, the internal organs were probably injured, and the vision was a little blurred. The ears were still buzzing, and the concussion was a bit of a concussion. He would not want to use this backhand, which wounded the enemy 1,800, if he could not use it. After all, Jinbing now has more and more superpowers. If there is something wrong with his body, Jin may not be able to use it, because past friendships take care of me. And not being able to kill in person is also an unacceptable thing for the bullseye, who is addicted to killing. So although the bullseye has explosives in the building, the power is not particularly strong. The bullseye is actually not sure whether they can kill the negatives. Anyway, he made up his mind and left as soon as the explosives were detonated. As for the site of the Golden Union, I tried my best anyway. On the side of the League of Defenders, when the explosives exploded, everyone turned their eyes to Frank. It's not me. Frank defended with a dark old face. If it were me, it wouldn't be the only power. Everyone was right to think about it. If it was Frank's explosives, how could that building stand there? Let's hurry over. Now is the best time to capture the negatives. Misty made a decisive decision and rushed forward immediately. Ahem. I have to find a place to heal my injuries quickly. The bullseye covered his abdomen and stumbled to the outside. At the same time, he kept muttering in his mouth, relying on this method to keep himself awake. If you are recovering from your injury, our New York Police Department can contact a good hospital for you. What do you think? Bullseye. Officer Misty walked out of the side alley and stopped in front of the bullseye. Damn. Bullseye at the moment, he wanted to struggle a bit. With a slight flip of his wrist, a few playing cards appeared between his fingers. If I were you, I would choose to grab it with my hands. Without waiting for the bullseye to attack, several figures he knew very well appeared one after another behind Misty. Okay. I surrender. Remember to prepare a better ward for me, I am seriously injured now. The bullseye put away the poker in his hand and raised his hands obediently to express surrender. Anyway, it is not the first time he has entered the game. I only hope that his boss can get him out as before. Thinking about it this way, the result is actually pretty good. Sorry to interrupt, this guy seems to be my prey. The sound of the film sounded from behind the bull's eye, and he turned his head to look. The film still wore the vicious mask of the demon, and his white suit was intact. Cough cough cough. How is this possible? The bullseye coughed up another mouthful of blood with excitement. He was so exhausted that he didn't even hurt a hair on the film. The reality that the bullseye was too different from what he expected made the bullseye a little suspicious of life. How can the negatives be so strong? Martin's originally ability is definitely not so strong. Although the explosion of the kind just now can't kill him, it can also cause him a lot of damage. He can be unscathed purely because of the film battlesuit made by Kraft. In the face of black technology from Dreams, this degree of small explosion is naturally not worth mentioning. However, the bullseye and the superhero of the Defenders League don't know so much. They only know that they have seen the negatives come out unscathed in the violent explosion. Should we continue to act as planned? Jessica Jones, who was already terrified of the negative's ability, twitched her mouth and retreated. Why don't you forget it? The previous plan is obviously not suitable for the current situation. Luke Cage and others were silent. From a rational point of view, Jessica's words are very reasonable. The negative film's ability has obviously exceeded their expectations, and they continue to smash with him without an effective solution. Obviously it is very unwise. But they have so many superheroes united together, they have never even fought, so they take the initiative to evade in a desperate way, and it is really too unreasonable. The self-esteem of being a superhero makes it difficult for them to retreat. Humph. Is he really that strong? You'll know after a try. It was Frank who was the most decisive. He raised the machine gun in his hand and pointed it at the film with a shuttle. Didn't I tell you not to make your own claim? Seeing Frank doing it, although Matt and others were unhappy, they could only cooperate and rush towards the negative. Ha ha. Seeing Daredevil and the others rushing forward, Martin immediately understood what they were thinking about, because he had never shown a group attack when he was in negative emotional energy, but he didn't use it before. It doesn't mean he can't. With his arms stretched out, a black shield was created in front of him to block the bullet that Frank shot, and Martin slammed his hands in front of him, and the black shield instantly turned into a large cloud of black mist, which would immediately follow the night. Moxia and others were all shrouded in it. A sense of despair instantly filled the hearts of Matt and the others. Although they kept telling themselves to hold on, they continued to kneel to the ground, posing a frustrated posture, and began to shut themselves down. You actually stepped on your ground. Please let me apologize with death. I'm a blind man who can't see anything. I'm just a waste of social resources when I live. The world is not worth. After only one meeting, the League of Defenders was destroyed by Martin Lee, and only Frank, who was a foreign aide, was not hit. Although people from the League of Defenders have long talked about the ability of negatives, even Frank felt a little guilty when he saw this scene of people kneeling directly on the ground, but he quickly got rid of this weakness. Idea. He, Frank Custer, is not like these so-called superheroes. How could he be defeated by mere negative emotions after all his battles? Take the negatives. I'm not afraid of negative emotions. Frank took the weapon in his hand, roared and pulled the trigger at Martin Lee. Ordinary firearms are not a threat to Martin at all. Even Frank's heavy firepower just makes him take a lot of hands and feet. As a black aura penetrates Frank's body, the tough guy's tears gushing out. Ah. Mariah HHHH. Frank cried out the name of his deceased wife, but did not lose his combat effectiveness like the others. Amazing. Martin at the moment really admires Frank a little. This is the first person who can maintain combat effectiveness under the erosion of his negative emotions. Just when he was about to throw several other emotions on Frank for a test, a beam of light suddenly appeared in the distance, and then a huge amounts of hole was opened in the sky, and Martin could vaguely see countless blacks flying out of it. Point. Martin felt familiar. Thor had a similar scene before in New Mexico. Is there any god who has come to Earth? Peter Parker shuttles between the high-rise buildings in New York as usual, doing heroic work of fighting crime and helping others. Hello, Mr. Robber, I think you should return your wallet to this lady. Don't take a taxi next time you drive, Mr. Driver. This is your cat, it's so cute. Please don't worry about this lady, I will save your child. Mr. Police, this is the thief I just caught. I'll leave it to you. The call from Shining Locust, do you answer it? The voice of Ikazunai came from Peter, who was fighting for justice. Definitely. Hey, Harry, what's the matter? Hello Peter. Harry Osborn's voice was slightly urgent. That shield, has he come to you? In order to get his dad out for treatment, Harry Osborn also took the initiative to find someone to inquire about him. As Kraft said, Norman Osborn is now in an organization called S.H.I.E.L.D. This organization has a lot of energy. Harry tried to use various relationships to visit his father, but S.H.I.E.L.D. strongly rejected him. Even the reason was very perfunctory, worried that Harry would be injured by the out-of-control Norman. Arrive. So for now, Kraft's method seems to be his only choice. During this period of time, Harry Osborn has also been doing superhero work as the Shining Locust, but S.H.I.E.L.D. has still not found his door. In fact, Harry could also understand that, first of all, S.H.I.E.L.D. is a powerful and special organization. When recruiting personnel, it must be carefully screened. Coupled with the negative state shown by their father, it is normal for them to choose to wait and see. But understanding is to understand. Anxious should be anxious, so after holding back for a while, Harry Osborn finally couldn't help but call his friend Peter Parker to ask about this. I'm sorry, Harry. Peter can understand Harry's feelings. I don't have any news here, but it's also possible that they have already contacted us pretending to be other identities, so don't be too anxious, at least Uncle Norman. There is no life-threatening right now, is it? Well, I am impatient. Harry actually understood the truth. In addition to asking about the situation, he also wanted to talk to a friend. After Peter's comfort, his mood really calmed down a lot. You have to come on, Spider-Man, but the surrounding area of Shining Locust sells better now. After relaxing, Harry Osborn also had the intention of joking with Peter. Bah. That's not because the battlesuit Kraft made for you looks more handsome. Speaking of this, Peter Parker was so angry that he must find a chance to exchange coins with Harry when he talked about it. By then, his Hell Locusts would surely surpass the Shining Locusts. Wait. Isn't the subject still the Locust? What does it have to do with his Spider-Man? Damn it. Sure enough, I still need Kraft to help me redesign the battlesuit. Peter Parker angrily ended the call with Harry Osborn, thinking about when to talk to Kraft about the spider battlesuit design. Disarm. Following Peter Parker's order, the spider battlesuit on his body quickly disappeared, and the exaggerated belt around his waist also changed back to a very ordinary look. There is also a belt in normal mode in the peripherals sold by the Dreamland Player Company, so Peter can wear it directly on his body, and temporarily buckle the belt every time he transforms without concealing it. Aunt May, I'm back. Peter Parker, who had finished the day of heroic activities, opened the door and shouted loudly inside. You just came back, Peter. Aunt May walked to the hallway and beckoned to Peter. Someone is looking for you. Hello, Mr. Peter Parker. My name is Nadali Norman, and I am the legal counsel of Stark Industries. Natasha Romanoff with short red hair walked up to Peter and shook his hand gently. Yes, talk to you alone? Stark Industries. Ah, no problem, definitely no problem. Peter froze for a moment, then recovered from Natasha Romanoff's red hair, then nodded awkwardly. The two came to Peter Parker's room and looked at the mess inside, and Peter blushed all at once. Sorry, it's a bit messy. It's okay, Natasha Romanoff smiled empathically. After all, you are still busy helping others. It's understandable that you don't have time to clean up the room, right? A good neighbor of New Yorkers. Huh. What? What are you talking about? What good neighbor? Peter hurriedly denied it, but he shook his heart, guessing the origin of Natasha Romanoff. Reintroduce yourself. Natasha Romanoff, the 7th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. We need your help now, Mr. Spider-Man. Because of time constraints, Natasha Romanoff chose to go straight to the subject. S.H.I.E.L.D.? I know you. Harry's father was locked up by you, but he has refused to visit him. Peter, who was mentally prepared, pursed his lips, making a look of dissatisfaction. Even if Uncle Norman's temperament has changed drastically because of Green Goblin's potion, he can't completely prevent Harry from visiting. The prison still has the right to visit. Mr. Harry Osborn should have also been injected with Green Goblin, and it should be a modified version by you. Faced with Peter Parker's dissatisfaction, Natasha Romanoff patiently explained it to him. Although he has not become evil like Norman Osborn, and has become a superhero like you, we can't be sure whether he is really alright. Natasha Romanoff expressed the concerns of S.H.I.E.L.D. With the current strength of Mr. Harry Osborn, if he suddenly moves during a visit, it will cause us a lot of casualties. We cannot take risks. But the sequelae of Green Goblin's potion, Harry and I have solved it. Well, I know you can't easily believe it. Peter Parker sighed helplessly. Actually, if you want to prove this, right now is a good opportunity. After chatting for a long time, Natasha Romanoff finally found a chance to get into the subject, and quickly talked about Avengers to Peter Parker. As long as you prove that the new Green Goblin drug does not have any sequelae, we will naturally release Mr. Norman Osborn. Although I learned about Avengers from Kraft a long time ago, Natasha Romanoff, an insider, will say in more detail. Sounds pretty cool. Peter Parker took Natasha Romanoff's cell phone and looked at the introduction of each member on it. Wow. There is Captain America. He has been frozen for 70 years. And Dr. Banner, I know him, his achievements in physics are amazing, but it's a pity. But Hulk is not more affected than Green Goblin control? Because this situation requires the knowledge of Dr. Banner, plus Miss Betty Rose is there, she can comfort Hulk, so Dr. Banner is still within control for the time being. Natasha Romanoff spread his hands and explained, and we also sent someone to contact Mr. Harry Osborn. Okay. Peter complained, and then continued to watch. Oh, and Mr. Tony Stark, he is my idol. Then he flipped through the video about Natasha Romanoff himself. Goo. Peter swallowed subconsciously, then glanced at Natasha Romanoff, who looked weak and weak. Miss Natasha Romanoff's skill is really amazing. Ha 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 ha. You're overwhelmed. Compared with Spider-Man, this skill is nothing. Natasha Romanoff responded with a polite smile. So, are you planning to let Harry and me join this Avengers? No problem. I've long wanted to fight alongside Mr. Stark again. After returning the phone to Natasha Romanoff, Peter Parker eagerly agreed. He didn't forget that he still had a task to unearth Hydra from S.H.I.E.L.D. Then it should not be too late. Let's leave as soon as possible. Natasha Romanoff was also relieved to finally get this broken-mouthed Spider-Man. We have already set up your school and at home. What I said is that you got an internship opportunity in Stark Industries. If this is true, it would be great. No, this is true. Your internship file will appear in Stark Industries. Wow. Then I have the experience of working in 2 big companies, Osborn and Stark. This is capital that I can brag about in front of others, and it is also very helpful for me to apply for college and find a job in the future. By the way, Miss Natasha Romanoff, how is S.H.I.E.L.D.'s treatment? After I joined Avengers, do I get a salary? You said that you are a 7-level agent, then what level will I be after joining? Is the agent level related to salary? Are all S.H.I.E.L.D. agents as good as yours? I also want to learn fighting skills. Will you arrange for someone to teach me? And the one who uses the bow and arrow in the video just now. He is nicknamed Hawkeye, right? He has good eyesight. Why not use a gun? Will he be a little behind with the bow and arrow? Or does he have any special abilities? Can only use bows and arrows to work? In addition, where is your headquarters? Harry and I wanted to find the location of S.H.I.E.L.D. As a result, there was no clue. Mr. Peter Parker. Unbearable Natasha Romanoff screamed, interrupting Peter's nagging. Yes. What's the matter? Miss Natasha Romanoff. Can you be quiet for a while? The smile on Natasha Romanoff's face was a little broken. Before, I just thought this guy had a broken mouth, but now I found out that this guy is not a broken mouth, it's a stubborn thing. Oh, yes, sorry, I'm a little excited. Peter Parker hurriedly covered his mouth, then released it slightly after a few seconds. Will you buy disability insurance for me? To shut up. Hey, Harry. Coming to the mothership of S.H.I.E.L.D. with Natasha Romanoff, Peter saw his friend at a glance, and hurriedly called Roar. He was suffocated when he was on the plane. Peter, you really are here. Harry Osborn stepped forward and gave him a hug. Gosh. It's Captain America. You really are alive. Peter suddenly ran up to Steve Rogers and yelled Roar. Hello, boy. Steve kindly calls Peter Roar. I have read your profile, you did a great job, Spider-Man. You have been rewarded. Compared with you, what I did is nothing at all. You have destroyed Hydra. When Peter said this, he concentrated all his energy, relying on spider telepathy to observe the reactions of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents around him. The results obtained made him a little frightened, because the people who reacted strangely to this sentence. There were a lot of people. Although there may be some misjudgments, Peter also knows the seriousness of the situation. Now even if there is no crafts matter, he must investigate it carefully. That's not the credit of me alone. Steve, who doesn't know anything about it, smiled modestly. Although he had just met, he had a very good impression of Peter Parker. Definitely, he didn't think so soon. Wow, it's flying. This is actually a helicarrier. Dr. Banner, how did you feel when you became Hulk? And why didn't your pants break when you turned? Peter Parker said nothing to Bruce Banner, and Betty Rose stepped forward and said that her boyfriend had been taken away, because she felt that if this continued, Bruce would turn green. In the literal sense. Sorry Peter, Director Fury needs Bruce's help over there. After Bruce Banner left, Peter immediately approached Captain America. Can I touch your shield, Captain? Isn't that Mr. Stark is there? Where are the others? Does Red Skull really have a skull face? Why is Hydra called Hydra? Why is S.H.I.E.L.D. called S.H.I.E.L.D.? Have you eaten? What did you eat? Is it delicious? In fact, Peter has so many words now, because he has not received any professional training, and he wants to inquire about the news without being too obtrusive. It is a good choice to erect a chattering persona. That's right, Peter Parker, he's not just talking about it. It's just a pain. Steve Rogers, both an American teenager's idol and a better understanding of Hydra, was not an agent, so Peter naturally became entangled with him. Just when Steve Rogers was about to be driven mad by Peter Parker, Natasha Romanoff appeared in front of him like a savior. Found Loki. He is in Germany now. Loki? What Loki? Because Peter's mouth was too broken before, Natasha Romanoff forgot to explain the current situation to him. It's the god of lies in Norse mythology. He stole an energy source called Tesseract from S.H.I.E.L.D. and used mind control to manipulate a researcher and the agent called Hawkeye. He didn't know what conspiracy was going to be carried out. Harry Osborn leaned over to Peter and explained that he knew how terrifying his friend would be once he opened the gate, so he avoided it early. Norse mythology? That thing is real. Kraft hadn't told Peter about Thor, so it was the first time he knew about Asgard's existence. So, are we going to be enemies with the characters in the myth this time? Cool? This is not something cool to shout about. Steve couldn't help preaching, but he regretted it after preaching. It's okay to provoke tuberculosis. What do? You stay on the mothership, Natasha Romanoff. You and I will go to Germany to capture Loki back. Steve quickly thought of a solution and found a legitimate reason to separate from Peter's words. We can help too. Peter naturally didn't want to be left behind, but neither Steve nor Natasha Romanoff paid any attention to him and boarded a Quinjet helicarrier in a hurry. Aren't we in the same group? Why don't we take me? Peter complained to Harry angrily. Harry Osborn raised his forehead and sighed. Just say a few words, Peter. Natasha Romanoff, that Spider-Man, has it always been like this? On the plane, Steve was silent for a while, but still couldn't hold it back. Natasha Romanoff, who was flying the plane, had a black face. I also only met him today. But it was indeed said in the document that Spider-Man's words. Yes. Point. More. Okay. Steve smacked his lips. It's really a bit too much. The two came to Stuttgart, Germany. At the moment Loki was wearing his peculiar croissant hat, preaching his theory that rulers enslaved civilians in front of a group of ordinary people. Captain Steve naturally didn't say anything else, and he jumped off the plane and started fighting with the so-called god of lies. Although Steve Rogers' physical fitness is far superior to ordinary people, he has an indestructible vibranium shield, and the assistance of Black Widow who is flying a plane. He has only fought back and forth with Loki, the god of lies. When the two sides were in a stalemate, a burst of manic music from far to near, Tony Stark wearing his latest steel battlesuit, drew a colorful and brilliant light in the sky. I'm steel, iron, Shaw, hey, accompanied by Tony Stark's inexhaustible singing. Iron Man, who was still shining with colorful light, fired a luminous cannon at Loki, who was facing Steve, and then fell to the ground with a clang. The light dissipated, the music stopped, and Iron Man aimed all the weapons on his body and fell to the ground. Loki. Do you want to continue? Bambi. Facing the siege of Iron Man and Captain America, Loki decisively raised his hand and surrendered. The new battlesuit. Very. Not bad, Mr. Stark. Steve Rogers picked up his shield, came to Stark's side with a complicated expression, and complimented him against his will. Do you need me to design a new uniform for you, Captain? To be honest, your uniform is a bit outdated. No, this is not necessary. Steve decisively rejected Tony Stark's kindness. Mr. Stark. Hello. Remember me? When they finished a fight with Thor and escorted Loki back to the helicarrier, Peter Parker greeted him excitedly. Oh, definitely, you are a Spider-Man, and you and the Locust Kid's belt are great, and they gave me a lot of inspiration for my new battlesuit. Tony Stark Tsunere, who took off the battlesuit, nodded his head slightly at Peter in response. Can you sign me? I am a big fan of you. Signing is too much trouble, how about a group photo? Stark glanced at Steve and Thor next to him triumphantly. He also had his own fans in the superhero team, which made him feel that Bayer had face. Facing Stark's show-off, Steve just returned a pitying look. But Thor on the side was unhappy. As a pure Asgard reckless man, the pursuit of glory was an instinct for him, not to mention that he hadn't dealt with that stinky Tin Man very much before. Hey boy, do you know me? I'm Thor from Asgard, Thor Odinson. Yes, I have heard them mention you. Peter nodded blankly. They said that the culprit who snatched Tesseract was your brother. As soon as Thor opened his mouth to make a difference, Peter spoke again. Is this Mjolnir? It looks very similar to the bag made by Kraft, but the shape he made is square, not as asymmetrical as your hammer. What Mjolnir satchel? I don't know what you are talking about. Thor hides the hammer in his hand behind him with a panic expression. Originally, Odin planned to wait for Thor to regain Thor's power, and then let him go to Ni-Davastar to find the dwarf clan to recast Mjolnir, but who knew that after Thor came back, he directly broke Bifrost. As a result, it would be more troublesome to let him go to Nidavistar, and coupled with Loki's disappearance, this matter was temporarily postponed. But there is a small thing growing on Mjolnir, and it needs to be solved, so Odin asked the local blacksmith in Asgard to build a shell for Mjolnir first, and put it on the hammer to block the unsightly small bump. Live. Oh, don't you say I haven't paid attention yet. Tony Stark also turned his gaze to Mjolnir in Thor's hands. It's really similar to the hammer made by Kraft. I bought one before, but where did I throw it? Wait, your part should be added later, right? Tony Stark saw the abnormality on the hammer at a glance, and reached out to touch Mjolnir, but Thor slapped him away. Don't move my hammer lightly. Midgard. Thor's eyes rounded, and Tony Stark barked with a grin. Oh, are you planning to marry your hammer? Tony Stark is not a good temper either. He stretched out his hand and tapped the reaction furnace on his chest. The steel battlesuit covered Stark's body with his singing and a lot of light effects. Enough. Now is not the time for you to argue with each other. Seeing Iron Man was about to clash with Thor again, Steve stepped forward and stopped between the two. I'm a little thirsty, do you want to go for a drink together? The three of them stood in a stalemate for a while, and Peter Parker, who was shrinking aside, suddenly spoke, which eased the atmosphere. The calming atmosphere of definitely did not last long. Under the influence of the mind gem in Loki's scepter, this group of superhero and S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury all quarreled because of various problems. Even Peter Parker and Harry Osborn are no exception. Why didn't you let my father go? Uncle Norman did something wrong, definitely needs to be punished by law. He can't help himself. That's not the reason why he can avoid questioning. Both Peter and Harry are in trouble with this pair of friends, and the others don't need to say much, they just need to do it. Boom. Just as the anger between the superhero grew stronger and stronger, an explosion interrupted their dispute. Hawkeye, controlled by Loki, attacked the helicarrier of S.H.I.E.L.D. At the moment, there was chaos on the ship. Oh my god. What did I just do? Peter grabbed his head and got up from the ground. He seemed to have had this kind of encounter before. It was a similar feeling when he was eroded by the negative energy of Mr. Negative. The situation is not quite right. I just felt like I had hit Mr. Martin Lee's ability. Harry, who had also had a similar experience, came to Peter's side and whispered. Hey, everyone. We seem to have been affected by some kind of energy just now. Peter Parker shouted loudly to the other roar. Very well, you reminded me in time, boy. Tony Stark at the moment has changed into a steel battlesuit, and points to Bruce Banner, who is turning green on the side. But it would be better if you could tell us earlier. At the moment, Betty Rose, the only one able to appease Hulk, was knocked into the head by the explosion and passed out in a coma. Oh. This is a big trouble. Because of Betty Rose's coma, Hulk's anger was obviously higher than usual. He roared and slapped Thor, who was blocking the road, and rushed in Betty's direction. But in this situation, it is not easy to hand Betty Rose into Hulk's hands. Are you ready? Spider-Man. Peter quickly changed into his combat uniform and used Cobweb to pull Betty Rose to his side. I'll send Miss Rose for treatment first. Hulk will leave it to you, Harry. You are really my good brother, Peter. Although complaining in his mouth, Harry stuffed the coin into his belt and blocked it in front of Hulk. Authorize. Progrise. When I shine, darkness fades. I wanted to ask before, do you daughter all popular in this way now? Although knowing the occasion was wrong, Steve Rogers couldn't help but ask Natasha Romanoff. No, only 3 of them are special. Natasha Romanoff made a clear line with Peter and the others. Fantas Public High School. Kraft absently wrote the answers on the papers. As an opener who has already poured all his knowledge into his head, the ordinary 8th grade final examination paper is really nothing to him. Obviously he is a gang leader, but he is so reluctant in this respect. Kraft whispered to his adoptive father while writing the last word on the paper. I handed in the paper. Finally finished the boring exam, Kraft got up to hand in the paper, and walked quickly to the classroom. Why don't you discuss it with Martin and drop out of school? Kraft was sitting on a bench by the playground waiting for Alice, but he was wondering how to convince Martin Lee. Although Kraft also likes to chat and play with his peers at school, there are too many things he wants to deal with now, and staying in school feels like a waste of time. Anyway, he also inputs the knowledge he has acquired into his head, and it doesn't matter whether he goes to school or not. However, with Martin Lee's stubborn character, the chance of persuading him is very low. Kraft also has a headache. Martin is a typical Chinese-style parent in learning. As long as he can get a good grade in the exam, he won't care about you, but he wants to not go to school. Don't think about it. Hey. America has supercriminals appearing in 2 of the past 3 days, so why not come to a supercriminal to demolish the school? Kraft, who was thinking divergent, thought so in his heart. Brother. I kept you waiting. Alice waved her hand and trotted to Kraft's side. Well, finally the exam is over. Kraft stood up and stretched, leading Alice to walk back, but the phone in his trouser pocket rang. Good brother Kraft, good brother Kraft. Peter? What's the matter? Kraft answered the phone. Kraft, I need your help. Peter's voice was low, and there was some panting. Harry and I have joined Avengers of S.H.I.E.L.D., but now there is a very bad situation. An Asgard named Loki intends to use an object named Tesseract to open the space door and attract aliens to invade our planet. Loki. Asgard? What about Thor? Don't believe me, I'm talking. Huh? You know Thor? Well, he got some news by accident when he came to Earth. It doesn't matter, you talk about aliens first. Kraft fooled Peter casually. You're right, Peter didn't dwell on this question anymore, and continued. Dr. Banner has already searched Tesseract before, but we were attacked by Loki's men before he could find us. I secretly got it from S.H.I.E.L.D. A copy of the data has been copied to your computer and has been sent to you. You must find its location as soon as possible. After speaking, Peter hung up the phone, and Angela's voice rang from the headset. Brother, I sent a piece of data from Kazuna I, and all the readings are similar to the previous time gem. Huh? So what Tesseract is actually one of the infinite gems? This is a lot easier, and Kraft hastened Angela to use the infinite gems radar to search. Discover the goal. Almost as soon as Kraft gave the order, Angela found the location of Tesseract. In addition, the mind gem in the Loki scepter was also in the radar's detection range. There were 2 detected targets, and both were in New York. Kraft's nano glasses at the moment have already been unfolded. The 2 gem marks displayed on the lens map are almost completely overlapped. In order to distinguish them, Angela changed their colors specially. The gem radar is based on the Dragon Ball radar. The feature of this thing is that the closer you get, the higher the accuracy, so now Kraft can only see that the 2 gems are probably near Manhattan. 2? Did Ancient One also come to New York? Kraft scratched his head. It's possible. Ancient One can observe the timeline. It is normal to see something wrong with New York and stop the aliens. If Ancient One is there, it shouldn't be a big problem, right? Just as Kraft thought this way, a beam of light rose into the sky in the direction where the gem was located, opening a huge amounts of blue portal in the sky, and densely packed aliens instantly rushed out from the other end of the portal. The Ancient One guy is so unreliable, also supreme magician too. Kraft turned his head and said to Alice, "You go and sound the alarm and let everyone hide in the shelter." Since seeing the existence of the Hulk, Kraft asked Martin Lee to pass the school's board of directors and set up a shelter underground in the school. He even conducted several evacuation drills. I didn't expect that the supervillain didn't run into it, but instead encountered an alien invasion. I have to give a compliment to myself who is planning ahead. Okay. Alice also knew that the situation was urgent, and hurried to the alarm device, while Kraft asked Angela to inform Martin Lee and the dogs and cats of the situation. A few seconds after Kraft's message was sent, his phone rang again. "Uncle Tony, I'm going to be serious now. Oops, how did you sneak attack?" "It's Tony Stark." "Kraft, I know you want to hide your identity, but the situation is urgent now." "Aliens, right?" "I already know. Now is not the time to think about the details. No matter how unhappy Kraft is, America, but it is still human beings. It is impossible to ignore the invasion of aliens." "You already know?" Tony Stark was surprised at first, and then quickly reacted. "That kid Peter has notified you? His belt really has your share?" "That's definitely, Peter Parker is my good brother," Kraft replied loudly. "Anyway, hold on. We will be here soon." Stark hung up and flew towards his building at full speed. "I'm afraid I can't hide it now." Kraft scratched his head, not worried, but a little excited inexplicably. It is believed that most boys and even girls have had such fantasies as aliens invading the Earth, and Kraft is no exception. What's more, he actually envied Peter and Stark, and they could show this thing in front of ordinary people. It wasn't that he wanted to be a superhero or something, but that he could only walk in the night in the beautiful clothes, a little panicked. In the current situation, as long as he does not act too exaggerated, then Kraft will be a hero in the fight against aliens, as well as Martin Lee's consortium and Dreamland Toy Company as the Confidence, plus Stark Industries and Osborn Group. Helping hand. SHIELD shouldn't be too much. Probably. If it really doesn't work, when the battle is over, I will go back to my hometown to find the Spear Bureau to cooperate. Kraft found a hidden corner and boarded Lord Bow Tie, and secretly calculated in his heart. Look. What is that? As Bow Tie-jun lifted into the sky, some students accidentally saw his figure, and pointed to the puppet that went away in the sky, and started to roar. Some people saw the beam of light in the portal in the distant sky. Outside. Aliens have invaded the Earth. This kind of scene is simply too common in the movie, and children at this age will not consider too many other possibilities, and the already panicked team has become more chaotic. Fortunately, the teachers of Fantas are still fulfilling their duties. Although they are also in shock in their hearts, they still do a good job of maintaining order and guiding the students to hide in the refuge. Kraft did not pay attention to those students at this time, and now those alien talents have just come out, they have enough time to hide in the shelter. Although Kraft at the moment is still worried about the safety of Aunt May and others, he also knows that in this case, solving the source is the most effective way. As for Aunt May and the others, naturally there are others to protect. What happened? In the Hell's Kitchen, the superhero who recovered from the salted fish state also saw the soaring beam of light. It is obviously not the time to continue confronting the negatives. It's an alien invasion. Martin Lee, who had heard from Kraft, said this with a hint of surprise in his tone. What is going on in this world? Can it be better? Not to mention the frequent appearances of Superman, mythological characters have also appeared one after another, and now even aliens are here. Although according to Kraft, the so-called Thor is actually an alien. You are joking? Jessica Jones' surprised roar in disbelief, completely throwing aside the previous hostility. Believe it or not, it's an alien invasion now, and I don't have the time to chat with you here. Martin glanced at Jessica, then pressed twice on his watch. A set of silver-white streamlined armor quickly covered Martin Lee's body, with a pair of metal wings tucked behind him. In the gap between the armor and the jet port of the metal wings, the black and white intertwined uniquely negative energy faintly exudes. Light. Negative film battlesuit swift form. This is the exclusive battlesuit that Kraft prepared for Martin Lee. In addition to greatly improving the strength, speed and defense, it can also increase and compress the negative energy of the negatives, so that the negative energy weapons he made have greater harm. Definitely has no effect on negative emotions. After all, when Kraft was making this suit, Martin Lee's negative energy was not as fancy as it is now. As for the styling, Kraft chose to focus on the battle armor named Genji in the Overwatch, with the flight device of the Pharaoh's Eagle, also from Overwatch, to form the swift form of the film battlesuit. In addition to the swift form, the film battlesuit also has a defensive form. Kraft doesn't bother the two masters at all. The shape is also found in Overwatch, from the Black Emperor's suit of the uncle named Reinhardt. Martin Lee in the battlesuit didn't care about Daredevil and their uncertain gaze. While using the battle armor to inform his subordinates to quickly return to the site to prepare for defense, he rose into the air and flew towards the base camp in Chinatown. So, you really are an ordinary black cat? Aunt May looked at the black kitten squatting in front of her and licking her fur, with a complex expression. Just now, Aunt May was cleaning at home, and suddenly heard that there seemed to be a bit noisy outside. She was about to go to the window to see what was going on, but she saw that her window suddenly had a big hole smashed out by something, which scared her. It's a big jump. Immediately afterwards, among a pile of broken glass, a cat wearing a streamlined black armor suddenly appeared. When the black battlesuit retracted into the collar, a figure that Aunt May was very familiar with was revealed inside. The little black cat named Beja from the Kraft family. Usually when Alice goes to the Feast homeless shelter to help, she often brings two pets, Quinn and Beja, with a red scarf around their necks, which is highly recognizable. What's the matter with this strange armor? Are you dreaming? Or is the black cat in front of you actually a superhero that can become a cat? Just when Aunt May's brain was wide open, the little black cat in front of her spoke. Aunt May, don't be afraid. Aliens have invaded the Earth. Kraft asked me to protect you. Aunt May. This black cat, she has spoken. Although it had long been speculation that this black cat might be a human change, when Beja spoke, Aunt May was still frightened. After finally waiting for Aunt May to calm down, Beja explained the cause and effect to her clearly. As for the alien invasion, there was such a big movement in the sky, no matter how unbelievable she was, the reality was there. So it's not just you, but Quinn can even speak? Aunt May at the moment also knew the reason Beja was able to speak. Yes, meow, the stupid dog is going to pick up Uncle Ben now, and he should be back soon. As soon as Beja's voice fell, Quinn rushed in with Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben delivered it. I'll go pick up Sister Mary again. Then, before Aunt May and Uncle Ben, who had been thrown down, react, Quinn, who was wearing the armor, rushed out anxiously. Plum. Uncle Ben, who was left behind, looked dumbfounded. Just now he was discussing with people what happened to the beam of light in the sky. Suddenly, he was brought to the sky by an inexplicable force. When he recovered, he had already returned home now. Who can tell me what happened just now? It's like this. Just as Aunt May explained what happened to Uncle Ben, Mary Jane was also taken to Parker's house from Broadway by Quinn. Aunt May? Uncle Ben? What's going on? Mary Jane, who was thrown down by Quinn, did a few deep roar sucks, only to slow down from the previous high-speed flight, and then she looked at Aunt May and Uncle Ben and the familiar cat and dog. Asked with a dazed face. Just now she was preparing for the next performance at the backstage of Broadway, and suddenly heard a loud noise coming from outside. She hurried out of the backstage and saw a group of weird humanoid creatures holding the same weird weapon in the crowd. The killing is undermining. Although I don't know what happened, the situation in front of her is obviously not very safe. Mary Jane hurried back to the backstage, and then ran to the emergency passage in the backstage with the other actors. However, when they ran out of the theater, the situation outside became worse. The sky was full of weird creatures driving flight machines, and they madly attacked everything around them. Mary Jane panicked to find a place to hide, but as the actors who were about to perform at the Broadway theater, their group of people were all dressed in colorful and conspicuous, so Chittori outside the theater noticed it. Run away. Seeing all the nearby aliens turned their guns to this side, I don't know who yelled, causing everyone to panic and flee. And Mary Jane, who was wearing a complicated dress, was suddenly taken down by the fleeing crowd. Not only did no one stretch her hand, but many people stepped on her directly. When she stood up again, a Zeta Swiss soldier had stood not far away and raised a gun to aim her. It's over. This idea just came to Mary Jane's mind when she saw that the alien who was aiming at her was smashed into two by an unknown force. Following her, she felt her waist tighten, as if she was being slapped. The pliers held huge amounts of the same. The experience after that is hard to say. It is said that flying is the dream of mankind for a long time. Mary Jane naturally had a similar dream, but the flight experience this time was terrible. The oncoming violent cold wind prevented her from screaming. Everyone is there. Before Mary Jane could clarify the situation from Aunt May, she was taken aback by Quinn, who was talking. The dog has spoken. It's a pity that Kraft won't let us go out to fight the aliens. The cat has spoken too. Mary Jane glared at her big beautiful eyes and felt her worldview reorganizing. Wait. Where's Peter? He was taken to the Stark group for an internship a few days ago. The Stark building is in the direction of the beam of light. Aunt May has no time to solve Mary's puzzles at this time. Why didn't you bring Peter back? You don't know Meow. Beja tilted his head. Peter is Spider-Man. He has a Meow who protects himself. What? Aunt May screamed, and then walked back and forth somewhat at a loss. How could Peter Kidd do such a dangerous thing without telling us? Okay, May, don't get too excited. Uncle Ben stepped forward and hugged Aunt May, softly comforting. This is actually a good thing, isn't it? Since Peter has ability and has chosen to become a superhero, then we, as family members, what should be given as support? After Mary Jane heard the news, her worldview that she managed to recover a little bit began to collapse again. It's really endless. Kraft, who was being chased by a group of Chitauri, scolded depressedly. Originally, Kraft intended to go all the way to the top of the Stark building to close the portal. Unexpectedly, these aliens were unexpectedly difficult to deal with. Although they did not cause much harm to him, they also dragged down Kraft's pace. He also tried to launch missiles and energy cannons at the device that produced the beam of light from afar, but they were all blocked by a blue energy shield, as if he had accidentally blown up someone who was staying on it. After flying out, I don't know if it's dead or alive. Controlling Bo Taijun in the air to avoid Chitauri's yet another attack, Kraft knocked an alien next to him off the flight with a stick backhand, and then took out his banging gun and pointed it at the distant enemy. One shot. Although these aliens are a little harder to deal with, their defense is really not good. They can clearly fight across the stars, but they can't resist even ordinary police pistols, let alone this one from Crazy Girl Gold, X's special firearms. I don't know what caused Chitauri's extremely serious technological direction. There is a body armor on the Earth. Although Chitauri also has an armor helmet, but the vital parts such as the chest and the head are all exposed. It is almost a neurotic design. However, these ordinary Zeta Swiss soldiers are easy to deal with, but the appearance is like a fish, and the large war beast and troop carrier that can swim freely in the air is very troublesome. I don't know the specific name of this thing, Kraft, but it feels like the Kuns described by Zhuangzi in The Escape, so he directly called roar them as alien Kuns. This kind of attack method that doesn't know whether it is a creature or a machine is very simple. There are only impacts and bites. There is no weapon on the body, but the body is too big to withstand others. When the body is large to a certain degree or small to a certain degree, it becomes very tricky. In fact, it is easy to solve these alien Kuns. Kraft directly uses the zoom in light to reduce them, or enlarges himself. Just this way, it will reveal that he has the ability of magnifying and shrinking substances. No need to say how attractive this ability is. Kraft doesn't want to cause more trouble to himself. And this is not the only way to solve these alien Kuns. Kraft drew out a long-handled weapon in the shape of a utility knife, which is a technological product from Tong Di the electric utility knife. Then he leapt to the head of an alien Kun with a utility knife. Fumomofu. Salted fish stab. Under the control of Kraft, Mr. Bo held the electric utility knife in both hands and held it high, and then slammed the alien Kun's head severely under his feet. With the blessing of the driver system, the electric utility knife pierced the alien Kun's skull almost without hindrance, leaving only a small handle exposed outside. Immediately following the utility knife, a large amount of electric light burst out, and a burst of burnt smell floated from the alien Kun's head. The Kun at Kraft's feet instantly lost its life and fell motionless to the ground. Roar. Get one. The defensive power of alien Kun is much stronger than that of ordinary Zeta Swiss soldiers. Even if Kraft can get one so quickly, he consumes a lot of effort on the driver system. However, before he could rest for a while, 2 extraterrestrial kunks flew over here again.